Good evening. The Cypress-Fairbanks Independent School District Board of Trustees is now convened in a special called board meeting on Monday, April 22nd, in the boardroom of the Cypress-Fairbanks Independent School District Mark Henry Administration Building. During the course of this meeting, the board may determine that a closed session is necessary. In that event, the board will meet with a closed session to consider duties matter posted in the meeting pursuant to section 551.071 and 551.084 of the Texas Government Code. Tonight we have Grace Hanley from Dr. Oliverson's office and Elizabeth Stinson from Paul Bittencourt's office, Senator Bittencourt. I'd like to welcome everyone this evening to the budget meeting. I'm grateful to see everyone here and reflecting your commitment and interest in the future of our district. Today's session is of paramount importance as we gather together to discuss and listen to recommendations from our district staff and superintendent regarding the budget for the upcoming year. As school board trustees, our solemn responsibility to adopt the budget that not only meets the needs of our district, but also reflects the values and aspirations of our community. The budget we adopt will shape the educational experiences and opportunities for students we serve. Our superintendent, along with district staff, have worked diligently to put together a recommended budget that aims to address the various needs and challenges faced by our district. Today, we're here to listen to the insights, recommendations, and concerns. Ultimately, we will approve a budget. It'll be up to the superintendent to execute on that budget in the most appropriate way, making decisions on what positions are needed to fulfill our mission to educate children of our district. The decisions on funding will be the best interest of children, of the school district, and our students. At this time, we'll now have agenda questions and speakers. You'll see your name on the screen behind me. When your name is called, please come forward and sit in the seats in the front row.
Our first speaker is Leslie Gilmart. Each speaker will have 2 minutes.
Good evening. This is a message for Cyfair voters. Stop electing people who want to defund public schools. CFISD is facing harmful budget cuts because elected officials obeyed their billionaire puppet masters. These billionaires want to dismantle public education, and they believe private school vouchers are a key strategy in getting that done. That's why, in the last legislative session, lawmakers withheld desperately needed public school funding in an attempt to pass a voucher bill that the majority of Texans don't want. They betrayed our public schools, either because they were afraid of those billionaires or because they too want to destroy public education. I used to teach high school English, and I couldn't help but make a text-to-world connection. We haven't banned this one yet, have we? Anybody need to sign a permission slip? It's The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. And in this book, the protagonist, poor Hester Prynne, is punished for adultery. She has to wear a big red A on her chest, an A for adultery. Well, I think Governor Abbott, State Senator Bettencourt, and Representative Oliverson should have to wear scarlet V's. They're voucher lovers. They betrayed our schools, and every voter needs to know. I also have a scarlet V for CFISD Board President Scott Henry. Last year, he skipped a CFISD committee meeting to attend one of Governor Abbott's pro-voucher rallies. Now, he gets to be a decision maker in these budget cuts. CFISD trustees also appointed pro-voucher community members to the Budget Resolution Committee. They should have to wear the V's too. Cyfair neighbors, if you support our public schools, vote out the voucher lovers.
Our next speaker is Christy Owens.
Good evening. I'm addressing you this evening for the first time in my 21-year career as an educator in CFISD. I'm a product of this district, a parent of 2 CFISD students, and I stand before you today with a deep concern regarding the impending budget cuts and the proposed 2% raise for all staff. While it may seem like a gesture of appreciation, I urge you to consider the ramifications of such a decision. The recommended cuts that have been shared will lead to a lesser quality of education for our children. The reality is that this raise will only exacerbate the strain on our budget and necessitate severe reductions in staffing. A 2% raise with inflation does not even cover a dinner for a family of 4. A minimal raise falls short of addressing the actual financial needs of our dedicated educators and staff. Moreover, it is counterproductive when it leads to layoffs and cuts elsewhere in the budget. A minimal raise paired with increased job duties will significantly impact staff morale on every campus. Additionally, did you think about the budget when you dismissed the recommendations of the Calendar Planning Committee that would have had fewer operational days? By adopting a calendar with more days than surrounding districts, you have placed an unnecessary strain on our budget. This financial strain could have been prevented with more thoughtful planning and acceptance of the recommendations of your community stakeholders. I would be remiss not to mention the rumors that high school librarians and college and career specialists will be reassigned or removed. This would be an absolute disgrace to our district and students. I do not have enough time to go over what those positions do for our respective campuses. I encourage you to reconsider the 2% raise and instead explore alternative solutions that uphold the integrity of CFISD. Anybody in education understands that this month is critical in making decisions for next year. Time is of the essence and our employees are waiting anxiously for answers. Thank you for your attention to these critical matters. We urge you to approve a budget where our schools thrive without sacrificing the well-being of our staff and in the best interest of our children.
Rachel Cameron.
So I understand that due to limited funding, Texas is forcing school districts to make tough decisions regarding their operating budgets. As a resident of Coles Crossing, I'm deeply concerned about the possibility of my children having to walk to and from school. The route closest to my house involves exiting the neighborhood onto Jarvis Road, where drivers often exceed the 35-mile-an-hour speed limit, making it unsafe for pedestrians. This road has little to no shoulder. It also lacks sidewalks and adequate lighting, especially during daylight savings time. Additionally, crossing Barker Cypress presents further risk due to limited shoulder space and no sidewalks. In addition, children will need to navigate the busy intersection at Splain Woods Boulevard. This is also dangerous, with drivers often speeding to make it through the light. I urge the committee to reconsider cutting bus routes for secondary students, as this decision could put our community's safety at risk. There must be alternative areas in the budget that can be trimmed without jeopardizing the safety of our children on their way to and from school. Thank you for considering these concerns.
Jennifer Hanneman. Jennifer. Allie Fitzpatrick.
Last October, Governor Abbott was quoted saying, "Once education savings accounts are passed, I will put on the legislative agenda full funding for public education, including teacher pay raises for teachers across the state." He admitted that he is holding our funding hostage until people bend to his political will. The people of Cy-Fair would like to know what each of you trustees are doing at the state legislative level to get the funding we are entitled to. Our community deserves to know what actions you all are taking on a daily basis to fix this funding problem where it originated, at our governor and his pro-voucher crowd. It is your job to apply pressure and fight for the life of this district. So tell people, what is your plan? 3 areas of proposed cuts that are extremely concerning because not only are they in opposition to the board's stated budget goal of prioritizing student and staff safety, they will cause more hardship for students and families that are already struggling. They are, 1, eliminating 40 behavioral interventionist positions, 2, removing transportation to alternative learning centers, and 3, charging transportation fees for students in the Juvenile Justice Alternative Education Program.
Removing behavioral interventionists will hurt teachers, students, and the overall culture of the district. Removing transportation to ALCs and charging students for transportation to the juvenile program will inflict more hardship on families whose children are clearly already struggling and could have dire consequences for families that are economically disadvantaged. Lastly, I would like for the board to quell the rumors going around in the community that librarian positions will be eliminated or that librarians will be split between schools. We want answers, and we want them from you. Thank you.
Jen Williams.
Good evening. My name is Jen Williams, special education teacher in Cy-Fair and mom to 2 kids. I was very conflicted about what to advocate for this evening. Do I plead with the board to not cut special education teachers because we are already incapable of completing all of the expectations of our job within the school hours allotted to us? Or try to convince you that we need our librarians, behavior interventionists, early interventionists, the list goes on and on. But we also need class sizes to stay small as possible so we can teach each and every student while providing differentiated, individualized instruction for all learners. What I finally settled on was reminding you, the board, my fellow teachers, and voters within our community that this could have been prevented. Governor Abbott promised us that he would withhold public education funds even though we have a surplus of funding until he could get vouchers passed. And he has held true to that promise. By voting for Greg Abbott, Tom Oliverson, Paul Betancourt, and other far-right extremist candidates, you have permitted our public schools to lose funding. And you are the reason that we are in this situation. To our trustees who have claimed we need to get back to the basics, I'm sure you're thrilled about these budget cuts. These cuts will continue to support your narrative. If we keep going like this, pretty soon we'll only be able to provide our students with the bare bones of education. Do better.
Tanzanika Williams.
That one? Okay. Good evening, School Board President Scott Henry, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Killian, and guests. I am Tanzanika Williams, President of Cy-Fair TSTI NEA. Ladies and gentlemen of the Cy-Fair ISD School Board, as you compile the data from the findings from the Budget Reduction Advisory Committee and commence to make decisions about reducing expenditures, please reflect and ruminate about how your decisions will impact all stakeholders. For example, our scholars, educational support professionals, who are our transportation and maintenance personnel, custodians, cafeteria staff, technology assistants, and instructional staff, our teachers, principals, HR staff, and so on. As I conclude, I would like to thank School Board President Scott Henry, the School Board trustees, and Superintendent Dr. Killian for spearheading this weighty responsibility. Thank you.
Monica Hatfield.
My name is Mo Hatfield, and I go to Cy-Fair High School. My school has many different support staff positions, and all of them are crucial to my school running smoothly. Our testing coordinator organizes everything for the PSAT, SAT, STAR, AP, and other tests. This position gives our counselors more time to prepare schedules for the next year and support students. Another position that takes something off the counselor's plate is our college and career specialist. Without her, many students would be lost on all things post-graduation. In addition to them, we also have our behavioral interventionist. He supports so many students. If you eliminate these positions, just think about all the students you will be harming by removing their supports. Another budget cut that would harm students is removing teachers' second planning period. In my school, the only teachers that have a second planning period are English teachers, team leads, and department chairs. My English teachers need the second planning period to be able to grade essays and give students feedback in a timely manner. Without this second planning period, teachers will have more students, thus more things to grade, but less time to grade it. Removing this extra period will only harm students and teachers. The harm will be on your hands.
Dr. Tara Cummings, Nikki Cowart,
As you've already heard, our budget crisis here in Cypher ISD is the making of our governor that called for 5 special sessions to push for vouchers, and it's on those that voted for him, period. The very same governor that visited Cypher on Jones Road, a mere walking distance from several amazing Cypher public schools, only to visit a private school in 0 of our public schools, 0. So whether you lean more conservative or more liberal, it doesn't matter. We should all demand that the legislators that represent our school district be here tonight to see what their work or lack thereof has created for the decision makers in this room. Hard decisions being discussed here will have a direct effect on all Cypher ISD staff and students, a direct effect on student outcomes that we talk about here every single month. It's going to take all of us moving together on one accord to ensure that we are not in this situation or even worse this time next year. And regardless of who created this funding nightmare, we in Cypher ISD have to find the solutions where the leaders in Austin have not. For the people that work for Cypher ISD and prioritize our students, they're the ones that do put our kids first, often out of their own pockets. We need to dig deep into our school budget tonight and continually look for every creative tool at the disposal of our district to make sure that those are not the ones that are paying the price. Our union members still want the same thing no matter what. Resources for the students that we serve, respect at work, a manageable workload, and most importantly, a pay increase to feed our own families. Again, the deeds of politicians should not be on the backs of our hardworking employees or our deserving students, but here we are. We look forward to seeing how our board members will tirelessly advocate for all staff and students. Now's your chance.
Danielle Cockrell,
Good evening. I would like to thank the Budget Reduction Advisory Committee for all the hard work they have put in. There is no win-win when it comes to a budget cuts of this magnitude, all while keeping the success of students as the main focus. I reviewed the survey of cost-saving report at the suggestion of coworkers, and I became concerned and wanted to make sure possible consequences of such measures were heard. Late bus runs. Many students utilize the late bus runs to attend tutorials, accelerated instruction, and extracurricular activities. Without this ride home, many students would not be able to attend and participate in these activities. Decreasing staff, including behavior interventionists, paras. I am at a campus that is at or not, if not above capacity. We need everyone to help support students, especially in unstructured settings such as lunches, assembly, before and after school activities. When it comes to custodial staff, they do an amazing job of keeping our buildings clean. The buildings are not shrinking. Reduction in staff would open the door for overtime. Is overtime cheaper than just keeping the staff? And then it comes down to increasing the temperature 1 degree. This seems so insignificant. When students arrive in the room, it feels and gets hot very quickly. Many teachers already have fans in their rooms due to current temperatures in the room. And then we go to personal appliances. I have been honored to have Dr. Blassingame and Julie Heineman come to my classroom. You know I'm all the way out there. So when it comes down to my 30-minute lunch, it starts when the bell rings and students are still in my room. So that gives me 30 minutes to go find the refrigerator, a microwave, go potty, grab my food, come back to my room, eat, and breathe before that bell rings. Now, I don't know where your lunch is located, but that is nearly impossible for that to happen. So we need to look at the whole picture, not only these cuts seem so easy, we'll just do it this way because staff is such a huge part of our budget, but I think we need to look at the top. Who is not directly affecting the teacher? Who does not the student? Who is not directly touching the student? That is where the cuts need to come, not the people that see them on day to day. Thank you so much.
2A, the board will conduct a budget workshop for planning purposes of the proposed 2024-2025 budget. Karen?
Thank you, President Henry and Board of Trustees. Tonight I'll begin with an update on the budget, and then Teresa Hull will provide an update on the Budget Reduction Advisory Committee as well as the Budget Reduction Plan. The information has already been shared with the board. However, it's a good starting point to discuss where we are for the 24-25 budget. When the budget was adopted last June, the anticipated deficit before the federal stimulus funds was $138.6 million. The deficit budget included a 100% staff fill rate and the estimated remaining federal stimulus funds of $65 million, resulting in a deficit after the federal stimulus funds of $73.6 million. I mentioned at the February board meeting that the estimated deficit would be less than anticipated. The reasons for a lower deficit are approximately $5 million more in federal stimulus funds available than originally anticipated. Also, there is $10 million in interest income, and we've been very fortunate that interest rates have been up, and so the interest income has been growing more than anticipated. In addition, we have ESSER revenue to offset the administrative or the indirect cost of administering the grant of $11.8 million, and we estimate there could be as much as $42 million in unfilled allocated positions based on our weekly vacancy reports. These gains are offset by a $10.3 million reduction in SHARS funding. Based on information to date, we believe the deficit will be no more than about $15.1 million. The deficit would have been approximately $96.9 million had federal stimulus funds not been available. That's the $70 million in ESSER funds, as well as the indirect cost of $11.8 million. However, it's important to note that some of the factors that could affect the deficit, whether it be slightly more or less, or even balancing the budget, or maybe adding a little bit to the budget, would be unfilled positions. We never know exactly where those unfilled positions will fall, and if they will be vacant all year. In addition, as I already mentioned, interest income, we've been fortunate that there's been a lot of the rates have been good, and there were several interest rate cuts that they thought that was going to happen before June 30th, and now we're hearing that there will probably be no rate cuts prior to that time. Also, we do a property value audit every year, just like you might do on your own property where you appeal your property values. We do that with the state values. And we have an outstanding property value appeal out there, and we're waiting to hear back from that. We usually hear back somewhere in August, but it's hard to know if we'll hear back in time. If we get it within a certain period of time after year end, we're actually allowed to include it in the current year's budget. So we don't know about that yet or what that amount would be. In addition, our average daily attendance. It's still been down about 2%, which is about $15 million for the district, but if that improves, depending where it falls at the end of the year. Also, if there's any unspent funds other than payroll that are left there. Also, another thing that we've really been working on, Dr. Killian has really worked hard with the 50% recognition of our local optional homestead exemption. And just to refresh your memory, if there's any money left over at the end of this year, the Commissioner of Education can actually approve 50%, recognize 50% of the value of that local optional homestead exemption that is basically being removed or we're not funded on, so to speak, because we offer a local optional homestead exemption. So if he recognized 50% of that, it'd be about $30 million if he recognized that. And I have to say, we've been very pleased. The commissioner's been listening to us. Our legislators have been talking with us. So we're very encouraged that they're at least listening to us about recognizing 50% of the local optional homestead exemption.
And Karen, I'd like to add too that not only have they been listening to us, but they've also been fairly helpful about trying to move that forward along with the trustees. One of the public comments was about what are our trustees doing about finance and trying to address this issue. They have been advocating on behalf of our school district for the local optional homestead exemption funding.
And if that happens, by the way, that's a year-by-year item. In other words, if they do it for this year, for 23-24, that doesn't mean those funds will be available next year. And we would probably receive the funding. What we're hearing is if that actually happened sometime maybe in August, if they did recognize that. Let's see, I think I went too far. Some of the factors that have impacted the deficit, and this is, we looked at the 2019-2020 fiscal year all the way till now. So some of the items that have impacted the budget or the deficit is the fact that there's been no increase in the basic allotment since 2019 and record inflation of 19%. The basic allotment is currently $6,160, and estimates based on 19% inflation would be that we would need to receive $1,100 additional just to get us where we were in 2019. Already mentioned the local optional homestead exemption, but if what we lose in funding is $63 million a year because the property, they do not recognize in the property value study by the comptroller that we have a local optional homestead exemption. So we are funded as if we are getting full funding for our property taxes. Also, 2% decrease in average daily attendance, which I just mentioned before, which is $15 million. And we've opened many facilities since 2019-20, and the cost to open those new facilities has been $18 million additional in operating cost. Salary increases that the board has approved, and some retention stipends that we've offered some years we've had retention stipends, but there's been a salary increase every year since 2019-20 and prior to that of $180.6 million. And then staff for growth has been $26.7 million. And then there's been increases in special education, bilingual, safety and security and expenditures over the last 5 years of $71 million. And then, of course, the expiration of our federal stimulus funds. This slide reflects the federal stimulus funding available to the district since 2020. Although ESSER 1 and a portion of ESSER 2 were used to supplant the state funding and the attendance hold harmless, the district still receives significant federal funding to address learning loss, the cost of addressing the pandemic, as well as to offset the deficit. The district spent more than the required 20% on learning loss and offered expanded summer school programs and additional tutoring. The federal stimulus funds must be spent by September 30th, 2024, and will not be available to offset the deficit like we have over the last several years. Without the federal stimulus funding, the district would have been discussing budget cuts sooner. The estimated budget deficit, it remains at $138.6 million, assuming a 100% staff fill rate. The target amount to cut is about 1/3 of the deficit, which is $50 million. The cuts also included funding for a potential 2% raise, which would cost $18 million. It's $9 million per 1% raise, resulting in a budget reduction plan of $68 million. Based on reductions of $68 million and relying on a portion of the vacancy factor to reduce the budget, the district would use approximately $70 million from fund balance. Now I will turn it over to Teresa Hull, who will review the work of the Budget Reduction Advisory Committee and the Budget Reduction Plan.
Good evening. As I shared with you last month, once the target budget reduction amount was determined, we began the process of soliciting input and feedback from stakeholders on 3 questions. Where should we look first? What should we not consider cutting? And what ideas they had for generating revenue for the district. A feedback form was created and distributed to the district-wide committees that you see on the screen. In addition, we submitted the feedback form to our community through one of Dr. Killian's messages. And we received over 1,200 responses to the feedback, or from the committee with feedback. A Budget Reduction Advisory Committee was formed, and you see the members of the committee on the screen there. I think we do have a few members of the committee in the audience. If y'all want to stand and just let us kind of recognize you. We have a few principals, I think parents, teachers, other community members that are here. So want to recognize them and thank them for participating. The charge of the committee, like I shared last month, was to identify areas to reduce expenditures, evaluate the needs to increase revenue, and evaluate the cost benefit of eliminating certain positions, services, functions, and programs, and provide budget reduction recommendations to Dr. Killian. The committee met 3 times, beginning on March 21st and ending on April 8th. In addition to the work being done by the committee during the meetings, the members were asked to review the 1,200 responses from the community and staff, and then to review and rank the final committee recommendations. That was the process and timeline. Sorry, I failed to flip that. The next 2 slides will provide you with the list of the cost-saving recommendations from the committee, including the priority ranking and the estimated cost savings of each item. I'll give you just a moment to review the items listed on this slide before moving to the remainder of the items. You will note the big dollar items included a reduction in district-level positions, modification in the straight 2% raise for all employees, a modification of transportation services, and the elimination of allocations at the secondary level to allow for additional planning periods for English language arts teachers. I will point out that we have made the decision and will implement the 7.5% reductions in district-level budgets with cost savings of $7,351,342. On this slide, you will again note modifications in transportation services, including eliminating late bus runs, changes in the high school staffing formula, and reductions in college and career specialist, custodial, behavior interventionist, and testing coordinators. If all of the items included on these 2 slides were implemented, the total cost savings would be $45,475,392. Short almost $23 million of our targeted amount. The next 2 slides list the committee recommendations for ways to generate additional revenue for the district in order of ranking. Several of the items, specifically an increase in varsity football ticket prices and an increase in the outside facilities use and natatorium fees, will be implemented effective July 1. For the remainder of the items, we are in the process of researching and developing proposals and recommendations for any changes in board policy and/or administrative regulations that may be needed. You will note that we are not considering any revenue increases in developing the budget for the 24-25 fiscal year. Many of the items will take some time to implement, and we want to have a year benchmark data to estimate the true revenue each item will generate. We are hopeful that many of the recommendations will provide relief for the 25-26 budget. This slide outlines the remainder of the items. The first item on this slide, a voter-approved tax rate election, while generating the most revenue, requires voter approval. Based on the statute, November 2024 is the earliest we could hold an election, and then if not that date, then the next earliest would be the following November. Many of the revenue-generating items contemplate increasing the access to our facilities for more outside use, specifically for-profit organizations and businesses, increasing advertising, and expanding our naming rights. I will share that we're in the process of drafting an RFP to possibly contract with an outside company to assist us in casting a much wider net for soliciting proposals for possible naming rights. We will keep you updated as we move through that process. As we shared earlier, in considering the projected deficit, Dr. Killian identified $68 million as the target budget reduction amount. Again, if we included all of the cost-saving recommendations from the Budget Reduction Advisory Committee, we would still need approximately $23 million in additional reductions. The plan on the screen actually exceeds the $68 million target, but after receiving input and feedback from you this evening, we are hopeful that we will be able to review and determine any changes we can possibly consider. The process for identifying the areas included with regard to district-level positions, first looking at current vacancies or those positions that will become vacant due to retirement or resignation at the end of the year. Again, areas repeatedly mentioned in the community-wide survey were considered, and/or recommendations from the Budget Reduction Committee. At the campus level, we relied heavily on the input from the principals serving on the Budget Reduction Committee, as well as all of the campus principals. Additionally, members of the cabinet, with the assistance of their department heads, generated additional budget reduction items. We focused on job functions and positions that we believe could be absorbed into other areas or positions with the least amount of impact possible. Clearly, all positions are important and all will have an impact, but we had to prioritize that to try to minimize the impact on those that we included. Clearly, all of the positions listed are not vacant or will become vacant at the end of the year. As Karen mentioned, we have a large number of vacancies district-wide, so it is important that our plan and priority that our plan considers a priority through natural attrition to absorb, reassign, and/or find a new position for which an individual may be certified and/or qualified for if serving in a position that may be eliminated. So we're going to try to do that through natural attrition, look at vacancies, then look at what areas of certification and qualifications they may have for any vacant positions that may come up throughout the process. The numbers look large, but I think it's also important to understand our current district-wide vacancy rates. Our average teacher campus vacancy rate is 370. Our average paraprofessional campus vacancy runs about 220 positions. Our average professional campus vacancy rate runs 90, and our professional non-campus vacancy runs about 40, and our support services run about 156. Again, certifications and qualifications will be factors in working through this process. Also, when you see the numbers, it's important to understand our actual expenditures. As you know, approximately 90% of our budget is dedicated to personnel. In reviewing the community-wide feedback, it's understandable, and even some mentioned tonight, reducing or eliminating the majority at the district level in administrative roles. On this slide, you will see the actual expenditures for the 22-23 budget. 2% of the budget was spent on general administration, which would include positions such as accounting, budgeting, human resources, attendance reporting, internal audit, capital assets and inventory management, purchasing, the tax office, instructional materials custodian, legal services, planning and research, community and public relations, and the superintendent's office. Clearly, all of those functions are important in that we continue to provide those functions in the operation of the district. 1% of the budget was dedicated to instructional leadership, which would include the costs related to managing, directing, supervising, and leading staff members who provide instruction or instructional-related services, such as instructional administrators, directors for special populations or educational programs, such as special education, CTE, etc., and the paraprofessionals who support those instructional leadership positions. 5% of the budget goes to school leadership, which includes the cost for managing a campus, such as principals, associate and assistant principals, registrars, and paraprofessionals who support school leadership. The other personnel and expenditures include all of our teachers, our teacher aides, substitute teachers, librarians, staff development, curriculum coordinators, counselors, psychologists, diagnosticians, mental health, social workers, nurses, LVNs, athletics, fine arts, transportation. You can see it's everything else in that category. Again, to help explain why the numbers look larger in such areas in the budget reduction plan, such as teachers, I think you have to consider the actual number of positions in the various categories. You'll see on the screen the largest number of employees in our district are classified as teachers at 8,912. You will note a little bit of a difference here in the way the different categories are arranged. That instructional administration on this slide is different from instructional leadership on the prior slide. Here, the instructional administration combines the instructional leadership and school leadership. So Dr. Macias will tell you she doesn't have 955 people in her department because that combines the school leadership as well. So now I'll turn over the presentation to Dr. Killian.
Thank you. I wanted to just go back on something really quickly. Real quick, when we were talking about the pie chart, if we were to eliminate, if we go back here real quick here. If we were to eliminate, and you probably heard me say this before, if we were to eliminate all of the general administration, which is up here in central office, which includes payroll and HR hiring, all that kind of stuff, what would that garner us?
19.5 million.
Okay, so 19.5 million, and then the instructional leadership, if we eliminated all that?
It'd be 9.1 million.
Okay, so we're still not getting close to that 68 million yet. And then finally, the last part, the principal, or I'm sorry, the campus administration.
It's 54.5 million.
Leadership, 55. So we're still not to our budget deficit, are we? So even if we eliminated all the administrative costs, I know there's that piece out there that you can just eliminate that, and all of a sudden, our books will be fine if you just eliminate that. And that's realistically, you can't do that because you still have to run the school, you still have to hold kids accountable for discipline. We need to welcome people into our campuses with the folks in the front office and all that. So that's really unrealistic. So that's why it's really important to look at this chart here. One of the things we were trying to avoid was as much campus impact as possible, but you can see there's quite a bit of campus impact there. The problem was we started off with just doing a 5% cut to our budgets at the administrative level, which includes all of the central office, not just here, but also operations and support. So they stepped up and did 5%. And after we did that, it just simply wasn't enough of a cut, so we went back and did another 2.5%. And that's how you get some of the numbers you're seeing for the district level and the maintenance and operations and the non-staff miscellaneous budget reductions. So you're seeing some teachers, and as Ms. Hull pointed out, we're also talking about a number of these positions that aren't even filled at this point. So just want to reiterate the idea that, we've got 42 million in unfilled positions, roughly is what we have. But we're tightening our belts, and we're simply not going to fill lots of those positions. So we can't count on that to balance our budget next year. So I think it's more realistic to think that we'll have a regular year next year where we might have maybe 20 million of unfilled positions over the course of the year. And a lot of that is because, hey, we have a teacher leave. It takes about 2 to 4 weeks to get somebody back on board. So you're going to have that piece go on in our school district, and that's where some of that money for projection might be saved. In addition to that, you saw on Karen's one of her first slides was that we're going to be looking at potentially using $70 million of fund balance. So we're going to be asking for this board to consider doing that as well and thinking about that. And then I'd like to go back to a slide real quick here, if I could. If you can get the slide deck back on. Ooh, sorry, it's going to be a lot of flipping, sorry. I wanted to go back to some of the reasons why we got here. Karen did a fantastic job of sharing some of those things, and I just wanted to reiterate some things related to this. So just in terms of what I'm hearing out there, I heard a lot of, oh, well, the legislature or the governor, okay, we're in this position also because of things that we've did or something that's also happened in terms of how we've come out of COVID, right? So for one thing, kids aren't coming to school like they used to. And so one of the most important things is that we need to get kids to come back. And that's a 2% reduction right there in our budget. And you can see that's $15 million hit to our budget right there. So pre-pandemic, we were seeing higher attendance. So that's not a legislative issue. That's not a governor issue. That is just the reality of how kids are going to school now. The other thing too is that local optional homestead exemption. That's a piece for us. We decided in 1983 in this district that we were going to give an additional taxpayer savings, and that was that 20% reduction. And that's been in our our calculations for a long time. We've had a little bit of delta there where we haven't had to worry about that, but now that 63 million is really hurting us, and that's why we're also seeking to get funding for it, because I think it aligns with the idea of taxpayer savings, but also being pretty conservative, because quite frankly, in our budgeting process, when I started looking at where we could take administrative costs out, we're pretty cheap in terms of how we operate administratively. And Kara did some research at the last board meeting and shared that we're sitting at about the 4th most efficient school district in the state for administrative cost ratio. That doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room at the campus level or at instructional level or at the administrative level at central office to make those cuts, even though we did do another 7.5%. So just to let our public know that we still tightened our belt here in the central office, but it's not going to get us everywhere because we're not going to be able to take care of certain things. The other thing is the federal funding. That federal funding ending is a cliff. I mean, that was always going to be a cliff. It was a 3-year piece of funding. We were smart. We divided it in thirds. Every year we didn't use one of the thirds. We filled in the gap to make sure that by the time we got to this year, we've expended all the money, so we didn't waste any of the federal money. So that was just a cliff we were going to have to plan for. And then there's just been incredible costs with the increase in enrollment in special education. I think the legislature has studied in the interim session some of those costs and acknowledged that the federal dollars that are sent to us to implement special education and all the rules and regulations that go along with it do not come anywhere close to covering that. And so you see the 71 million in additional costs that we have. That's over and above what the state gives us, but really that's a federal mandate, and that's way over and above what the federal government gives us. So, and then just the normal things, the salary increases and the retention stipends. You might think, well, maybe you shouldn't have done all those. Well, we are in a job market where we simply can't keep people without keeping up to some extent with inflation, and I totally acknowledge that 2% doesn't come anywhere close to keeping up with the inflation we're seeing right now, but it's what we can afford potentially to do and make less cuts than what we really want to, or what we really need. That I need to flip that. No, make less cuts. Well, than what a 4% raise would cost us. So, which would be more in line and getting closer to the inflationary piece. The other piece that I'll just say is, I was on the Finance Commission back in 2017-18 when we went through the whole Finance Commission piece, and that bill that came out of it ended up with a historic raise to bring the basic allotment up to $61.60. But who would have thought that we would have had this hyperinflation that followed it and made that so much harder to get along with? That was part of the problem that also compounded some of the things that are going on. And then, of course, we have been a growing district, so we've had to add staff with the staff growth. And then we've also had operational costs. So it's more expensive to operate campuses than there were before, and facilities in general. And we are looking at things that we can do internally to continue to make ourselves more efficient. So I just didn't want to leave this slide without saying there's a combination of factors that have got us where we're at right now. And it's not just saying, hey, it's this person or that person. It's just a very unfortunate situation where we've got a number of issues that are going on that have impacted us. So I wanted to go on and show you something real quick. I'm going the wrong way. Sorry. Can you get me back to the slide so that way I don't have to make everybody dizzy and nauseous by flashing through it really quickly? It's a question slide. And then from here going forward, I want to make it clear to folks that we really did look at the Budget Reduction Committee as a place to kind of start after we already looked at our shop inside as cabinet members. we were very interested in trying to limit the impact to our campuses as much as we possibly could. So we went ahead and took all this stuff on ourselves as fast as we could and did the 5 and 2.5% cuts. And that did really help keep it away from campuses for as long as possible. In addition to that, we also asked for our principals to weigh in, because we thought that really, if you're thinking about the number one person person on a campus that knows what they might be able to address and what they might not be able to address are the campus principals as to what we could go and ask them for. We didn't want to make those cuts. We wanted to give that to our principals to say, all right, so how can you get us there? Now, with that in mind, I wanted to kind of lead us into the next part of the discussion and the input we really need from our school board. Number one, in terms of the questions that I have up here on the screen. The first one, so we've already heard someone say something about pay increases, and obviously 2% is not very much, but we needed to have that in order to develop a budget that'll be ready to go July 1st. I need to know, in terms of a discussion with the school board, is do we want to move forward with a 2%? Do we want to do the modified piece that came out of the budget reduction committee, where it'd be 2% for teachers and hourly staff, and then for administrative staff it'd be 1%? That saves us roughly how much, Karen?
It saves us about $1,162,747.
Okay, so you can see that the bulk of a pay raise is going to be with what we do with all of staff, right? They're just, the bulk of our expenditures are staff that are not in administration. So it's going to save us some money, but it's not going to save us a lot of money. But we would really just like to hear from the school board, what say you, so when we bring you a budget, we're not bringing you something that is not supported, so. And I'll pause for some discussion on that, if that's okay, Mr. President?
Absolutely. Lucas?
So I've got a question of, when we talk about a pay raise, when we've done our pay raises in the last 2 budget meetings that I was a part of, that was always, there were a couple of factors that we discussed. A, is that how do we support our families that are our teachers, and how do we benefit them? And the second question was, or a second question was, where we stand in terms of competitive capability to other districts. So, you know, we don't have that full discussion going here yet, right? We don't have a competitive cost analysis of where we think the surrounding districts are going to be. We do know what a past pay raise did in relationship to staying roughly equal or comparable to other districts. So could you speak to, for our new board members in the audience, could you speak to where you think that puts us?
Yes, I mean, last year, we looked at this before the raise, and we were fairly comparable. We weren't in the top, but we were, close to getting into the top area. And then we also looked at it afterwards, but most districts kind of gave about the same amount of raise last year. Some years it was quite a difference, some years where we would, like, for maybe one district gave 5 and another district gave 2 or something like that. But it was fairly close last year, so I still feel like we're about in that range. That is something I was planning to bring to the board in May, at the May board meeting. But this year, I've been in talking with my other CFO friends. The most I'm hearing is 2% from them so far. I've heard a few say no, nothing, but most are kind of in the 1% to 2% range that I've been hearing.
Justin?
I want to thank everybody for the presentation this evening, and I want to thank the members of our Budget Reduction Advisory Committee for their attendance this evening. I was able to attend one of the meetings as well, and I'm For myself and my colleagues up here, we're extremely appreciative of your efforts. Everybody took this very seriously, and I felt as if it was a collaborative community team effort, all of us working together. So I want to express my gratitude for all of your contributions and for being in attendance this evening. Some questions, and then to your point, Dr. Killian, I'm going to provide my perspective on a couple of your questions. So we have a $138 million deficit, and we're going to try to shore that up in two different ways. One by addressing budget cuts, and one by, in essence, by dipping into our savings account. Karen, I know we've discussed this before, but it's worth repeating again. We're looking at approximately $70 million out of our reserves. How many months of operating capital is that again?
Because what we looked at is if we gave, I guess it depends which way we go on this, because what I took into account is looking at the fact that we probably will go into fund balance about 15 million this year. Then if you take into consideration the 68 million in budget cuts, assuming that right now, and then assume that the vacancy factor, I guess you could say, offsets the raise at the end of, at the end of 24-25, we would have 4.85 months in fund balance if we went into fund balance by the 70 million.
Okay. I was hoping we'd be closer to a full 5 months, but, the numbers are what they are, and so we're going to have to make those decisions. And you mentioned the unfilled positions, and Dr. Killian, you mentioned, I think that there's approximately $42 million in unfilled, and one of the proposals you're looking at is saving us approximately half of that, 20 million, by eliminating those positions?
Correct. There's a number of positions in there that won't. So some of the reductions in positions that you saw on the list are going to be absorbed, basically, and we're going to end up reallocating some of those staff members across the open positions that we do have. So we're eliminating positions, but not people.
So the numbers that we saw, or the positions that we saw on the slideshow of the positions that are possibly going to be eliminated, it's a combination of real losses as well as just closing some positions.
Correct.
Okay. So my perspective on the pay raise, and this is where I'm at on it as well. I am in support of a pay raise, a 2% pay raise. My colleague to the right here was discussing some of the cost of living increases. What are we typically seeing as a COLA, cost of living increases? What is a typical COLA that a school district has done of our size? What's a typical percent increase?
It's typically been 3.
3?
Most people.
That's very common and typical.
Yeah.
And so if I heard you correct, Karen, so several of the other school districts are looking at around 2%.
Correct.
As well. So everybody is sort of feeling the effect of this a little bit, and nobody's really hitting that typical benchmark of about a 3% COLA.
That's what I'm hearing right now.
Okay. Well, and the other thing too is, go ahead, sorry.
But I was going to say, though, we're not exactly truthful with each other, because we want to play a game of, we're going to say we're going to go 2%, but then one of our neighbors says 2% but goes 3%.
Right.
Because we want to get a one-up on the competition,
So with that being said, and I'm glad you brought up the term competition, and you mentioned it now and you mentioned it earlier in your previous comments, we are consistently in competition with other school districts, both locally and across the state. And we're in competition with private industry as well for good talent. We want the best talent possible here at Cypher ISD to teach our kids. We've all read reports. We're very concerned about the teacher shortage, the current teacher shortage, and the looming teacher shortage we're looking at as well. And all my campus visits, that's one of the things I always talk with campus leaders about is, what are your concerns about teacher shortages? What are your thoughts on that? Is that something that concerns you as well? And I can tell you from a campus level, that is definitely a concern. And so I do believe that if we did not go forward with a pay raise, we would be exasperating that issue and be contributing it to it. So to one of your questions, Dr. Killian, I am in support of a 2% pay increase, and I'll withhold the rest of my comments for my colleagues.
I would like to add, in addition to that 2% that we're thinking of for teachers and paraprofessionals and all that, it's also in Matt's area with operations. So we just can't find enough plumbers, electricians, all those positions. We're in direct competition with the private sector, and you really pointed it out well, though. We're in direct competition even now for teachers because they can go work in other industries and make more money. Yeah.
So one other question that you wanted us to address was the opening of Byrd Elementary School.
I was going to go one at a time.
Okay, so
I just,
we'll get to that when we get to that. Thank you.
I have another follow-on, if I could, sort of expounding on our previous point. So Karen, one of the things that we heard from our guidance regarding our fund balance is that, and we've discussed in committee, is that we need to be able to cite, to retain our preferred bond rating, we need to be able to cite a plan for years going forward. So if we tell ourselves, and if we as a board, we say, okay, we agree with this prioritization, let's go with we're going to dip into fund balance a little bit. Do you have this is not the meeting for it, nor are you responsible for the full answer, but I suspect you've already got some thoughts. Can you share with us any thoughts regarding a plan going forward?
Yes, I mean, the plan going forward would be for us, of course, obviously, we would tell them if there's any revenue options that would be coming in, but then from that, we would need to, which could be some of these revenue items that we showed you, we might have more of a feel for them. If we decided to do anything like a VATRE or something of that nature. But then also we would have to say what other budget cuts we would be looking at over a period of time so that we don't dip below 4 months in fund balance. So I think it's just giving all those different options to them and being able to come back and say what our plan is once we know. For now, it would be the first year, just explaining what we're doing now and how we've planned for this, and we've used the federal stimulus money to help offset the deficit, and so that we've really positioned ourselves in a good position to be able to go through this process.
And if I was to try to provide a layman's example of why the general audience and our community cares about us providing said plan to people that are involved in rating our bonds, generally speaking, if we're able to cite strong financial stewardship and our ability to look down the road with a plan that is cohesive, makes sense, and is likely viable, then it supports our preferred bond ratings, which means we are sold more quickly in the market when it's time for us to sell? How does that impact?
It's a combination of that, but primarily it's just, it doesn't cost us as much. It's just kind of like if you have, own a house and you don't have, real good, you haven't had good background credit rating and stuff like that, then it's going to cost you more interest whenever you buy a house. Well, it's kind of the same concept. So our interest rates would be higher.
Got it. And so kind of extending that idea a little bit further, Matt, into your world, that when you're thinking about our ability to get, it's where we don't want good money chasing bad. And when we do our bonds and when we're talking about us being able to fund improvements to our facilities, improvements to maintenance, and for the operations budget to be able to work seamlessly, we want all of the funds that have already been allocated and earmarked, we want the majority of that coming back to do things taxpayers paid for rather than fly out the window towards, higher costs, I would guess, right? And I addressed you, but it's for both of you, I think.
Well, the answer is yes. We want all the funds we can get to complete the projects that we promised the community we would complete.
Yeah. So I think, Dr. Killian, you asked for a point-blank answer of, directionally and from a prioritization standpoint, will we support a pay raise? And for myself, in the context of, I think it's the right thing to do for our teachers and families, recognizing the comment from one of the community members. Obviously, we'd like to be able to meet much higher, but with what's in front of us, it doesn't seem like that's prudent or available. Probably available than prudent. But I do believe that us maintaining competitive positioning among our surrounding districts with the primary idea of supporting our families that have chosen to teach in the district, I do support a pay raise.
To my left. Go ahead, Julie.
Before I answer that question directly, Karen, I do have a couple of questions. So you say our deficit, projected deficit for next year is 137 million. The goal that was set by Dr. Killian was to cover a third of that deficit, which to me, that's 45.6 million. And then a 2% raise would be 18 million if we gave a full 2% to everyone. That's we would need to reduce then by 63.6 million. So why are we shooting for 68?
We had originally just, we rounded up, trying to just thinking of going into the next year, trying to not make it as bad for 25, 26, is the way we were looking at it at the time, close to a third.
That's
It's just slightly more than a
$4.4
third.
million rounding up that are
Yes.
jobs. And so I'm concerned that we've rounded up so much that we're going to make cuts that we maybe don't need to make. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think we need to make them at some point. We may not need to make them right now, but they were rounded up mainly because I didn't think we were going to get there, quite frankly. I didn't think we were going to get to 68. And actually, Teresa pointed out that we had a very hard time getting there, and we had to go back and then ask principals for more cuts in order for us to get to 68. So yeah,
I just question why is 68 the goal?
Because I'm trying to get to covering the pay increase, and then there's unforeseen things that are going to happen through the year. That's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about anything that we haven't thought that might be an additional cost that might come up over the course of the year. And I want to make sure that we carve out about a third of that deficit so that we're not in dire straits next year, depending on what the legislature does, right? So, and then the other piece to that is I wanted to give us some wiggle room too. If there were some things in the cuts that we just couldn't stomach, and we would be able to go back from that, so.
And I think in addition to that was really just trying to estimate what we thought the unfilled positions, what would be remaining in that budget. So that's always a guesstimate.
Right.
We've been trying to monitor that throughout the course of the year and have an average number.
One of the worst things that could happen, well, it'd be, what if the economy tanks on us over the next year? Because we're building a budget for a whole nother school year that, is a couple months in the future. So what happens if the economy goes south? A lot of things happen with the public sector. People retreat from the private sector into the public sector for that job security piece and all. And if we start filling all those positions, then we won't have that $20 million savings that we've had in the past. So I've seen that before where we didn't have a problem with filling positions. Just as easily as it swung this time till we have a lot of unfilled positions, it could swing back a little bit if the economy changes. Just trying to give us a little bit of wiggle room.
Sure, I understand that, and I appreciate that explanation. It just, that since the numbers weren't matching up, I wanted to understand where that $4.4 million difference was, and now I understand it's that wiggle room. And I do appreciate the concern for what could happen possibly with the economy. As we saw in 2011, when the state faced a significant financial crisis, but public education was cut by $5 billion, and we had to make similar cuts. And I've heard this from people I've talked to on campuses that we've been here before. We've had to make cuts like this before. They were painful just as they are now. They were temporary, thank goodness. And so there's some encouragement in that we'll get through this because we've done it before. And even though I know we don't want to place blame or any of that, it's important to acknowledge that this is not a financial crisis at the state level. This is a manufactured crisis with public schools. The money is at the state capitol. It's being held. There's an over $30 billion surplus, but public schools are still suffering and being underfunded. So I know we don't want to cast blame, but we need to be honest about why we are in this position and why we are looking at cutting some very important positions that will affect our students and our staff. This board is going to do the best that we can to make good decisions, on behalf of our district, but for those who care, I encourage you to contact your elected state reps and let them know how this is impacting you personally and how it's impacting your students and your jobs. And then I also want to ask a question, Karen. You said that we will know about the receiving back half of the penalty that we suffer from offering property tax relief to our taxpayers in August.
It's anticipated sometime this summer because the decision has to be made before, it'll have to do with this current year. So if a decision is not made, then that money just rolls over into, with the.
Into the state's general fund?
With TEA, it's the money at TEA and it rolls over with TEA. So if the decision isn't made by August 31st, then that means we're not going to get it. But we would be hearing something, hopefully, we've been pushing to try to get an answer sooner because it does impact budgets. But what we've heard is sometimes we might not hear till August because that's when the payment would probably occur.
And who will be making that decision about that $30 million that is technically ours that we have been penalized and it's been withheld from us?
It would be the Commissioner of Education in conjunction with certain legislators.
So that might be another opportunity to reach out to the Commissioner of Education. His name is Mike Morath, and encourage him to release those funds to Cypher ISD because of the property tax relief that we give to our taxpayers and that we have experienced a $62 million penalty for that, but there is an opportunity to get half of that back.
And if I can add, Dr. Killian was talking about when you were asking about the rounding up, we did it because also looking at things like, for example, the SHARs. We found out this year we were getting 10.3 million less when we weren't expecting it. I've discussed interest income. 1 year it was several years ago, when the interest rates dropped down to zero, well, we had budgeted like $6 million in interest income and we got 200,000. So that's the reason why we were being, very careful about this, is there's so many unknowns.
Sure. No, and I appreciate you bringing that. For folks that don't know what SHARS is, that's the reimbursement we receive when we provide medical care to some of our most medically fragile students. And that funding was cut by $10 million. And that's part of the deficit that we're experiencing now. Dr. Killian, that's a long way of answering your question. In terms of a pay raise, I have always voted for a pay raise since I've been on the board. In this case, I take the recommendation from the Budget Reduction Advisory Committee at 2% for teachers and hourly and paras, and 1% for administration. Because that committee spent a great deal of time and energy and focus on coming up with that recommendation. So I would go with their recommendation. Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead, Natalie.
I would also like to thank the committee and all those citizens that were willing to contribute their time and their thoughts to this difficult process. And I just had a couple of quick questions also, Karen. Thank you. Great questions out of my colleagues. There were some I had. So when Justin asked about the 4.85 months of fund balance, I think we discussed a meeting ago or so that because of our budget, our fiscal year start, that we need 4 months of fund balance. Is that correct?
That's correct. They recommend at least 4 months because it's not till December and January before we start getting our tax collections in, but we still have to make payroll.
So 0.85 months of fund balance, how much is that dollars-wise?
I can, let me see, look.
I'll ask another question of Teresa.
It's about, it's about 95 million per year, that would
about
equate to.
80 million or so,
That would equate to.
Okay, so that's 82 million, is that correct? In 8.85 months?
No, it's 4.85 months.
Yes, but just the 0.85 that's above the 4 that is the amount of fund balance we should keep at a minimum.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, I'm following you now.
Yeah,
That's
okay,
correct.
So how much is 0.85?
About 80 million? Is it about 80 million?
Yes. Let's see. Yes.
$85 million.
That was Aggie math, by the way.
Well done, Aggie. This Longhorn couldn't do it in my head. So we have, because I have had, I think the second, maybe my first meeting I ever sat on the dais, I had asked that question about fund balance, because my philosophy is the state gave us the money to teach the kids today, and when we have about 13,000 kids who can't read on level, every penny should be spent this year, given to the kids this year in order to get the work done for them this year. And so I know that COVID gave us some lessons, but we've already talked about some contingencies based on Julie's questions. So I wonder, I asked the question, do we have to go above 4 months, which is our minimum? And if we're taking care of other unexpected things, and is it true, just like ESSER, every time I've lived an emergency or crisis in our state, the legislature has come through, or the government has come through and figured out how to fund us. Like when we had the 11 days of whatever storm, or they normally act as a whole to make sure schools are whole across the state. So, and then even with COVID, the federal government stepped in and really funded us, right? So I just question whether that money couldn't be better used to take care of the kids next school year, that 0.85 worth of fund balance. And so I pose that really to our superintendent administration to consider, because to me, I'm leading into the question around pay raise, right? I just had one other question, which was about the, in that question, in the slide that says that we have staff for growth, that was 26.7 million. So we basically had growth, student growth from 2019 through 2020. Was this including positions that had to be added or were added with ESSER funds? Were these new positions?
It does not include the ESSER funds, but it would include, of course, we had some special education positions, but then also if for example, when we had additional positions, when we budget for certain positions to happen, but if there's also like a increase in kindergarten classes, different things like that, then it takes into consideration all those different adds too.
Okay, that's excellent. So what you're saying, this is just like literal growth in programming, not adding in, for example, the interventionist positions and all those others we need.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. I just had one more question on the transportation, those cuts that were proposed at 10.8. That's without making changes to the routes, or that's with making changes to the routes?
That's with making changes to the routes.
So that's a savings based on the changes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Sorry, and we'll have a question related to the transportation next.
Excellent. I'm going to say that Julie made the same comment. And Teresa, what it means on the slide where it's ranked by the committee, when it says it's ranked second to about the raises for the staff, right? It's a second ranked item. What they were saying was at that amount, that's a second. You see, it's like a double negative. The giving a raise is ranked second because they're saying we don't love that it's 2% and 1%, but we're prioritizing giving that as the second priority.
I think they ranked it second as modifying the original recommendation of a 2% across the board.
Got it. So to that committee, the raise was very high priority or not?
For the
That's what I'm trying to figure out the logic there.
Making a modification, they ranked modifying from the provide a 2% raise for teachers and paras and 1% for all others. The original recommendation, as we shared, was 2%. The way I read that is they prioritized making a modification in that.
Yeah, so it's not super clear that they're saying give a raise.
That's a
as priority.
savings.
Okay, that's what I was trying to figure out.
Because it's a savings. If we modify from the 2% across the board, we can reduce or reach our target amount, 1.2 million. That's a savings there.
Yeah, so to me, it's not super clear how our community's feeling about the raise. I definitely, one of our speakers who addressed the 4 things teachers care about, I love they were respectful and the fact that the teachers want, resources to teach the kids to meet their needs, respect at work, a manageable workload, and a pay increase, right? So, and I definitely, I love, honor, and respect our teachers, and I definitely believe that they deserve a raise. So I would support the 2% and the 1%, but I would also ask us to make a broader question of that, because I want to make sure it is a priority, because we've heard from some educators who are saying, I'd rather have, if I'm interested in resources to meet the needs and a manageable workload, where is that offset with, if I lose other positions at the campus that help me help the kids, then I don't know how that offsets the fact that like 2% is enough to make that workload manageable, the impact to my workload, whether or not I'd prefer it.
I would say that they are, and I think, Mr. Morgan, you may want to chime in. I think that was discussed in your subcommittee. Am I correct? The raise?
Yes, ma'am.
Because if they wanted less of a raise, they would have modified their recommendation even more for a greater cost savings. Does that make sense? They could have said 1% across the board or no raise, which would have been a greater cost savings. So there was a priority for the committee, and go ahead and chime in.
Oh, no, that's, Teresa's right. They were given an opportunity for 2%, and they came back and suggested 2% and 1% for the
And
cut.
it was about 12 teachers on the committee, is that right? I'm just wondering how important this is to our teachers, because frankly, my vote, to your question, my vote will be whatever tells teachers we value you, we need you, we respect you, come teach in Cy-Fair, because they are our most valuable resource, and to our colleagues' comments, it's a limited resource, and it's a pool we have to make sure that we are making ourselves the best place to be a teacher. And so I would like to know if teachers would rather, if they would balance the other people helping them with their workload versus a raise, and then that would be what I would support. And I would like to just make another comment. I appreciate the principals weighing in, because to me, wholesale cuts aren't the way to go. Every campus we visit is a very unique culture. I have loved my visits to campuses. I've enjoyed, each one had its specialty, its way it met the needs, and it just, they knew their students so well. Everyone was so passionate about their kids. And so I think those principals really know the kind of, which positions that are so high leverage that they cannot live without them, and which positions maybe they could live without. And so I would always recommend like a site-based decision-making type model. I know that some systems around would say, hey, you can trade this unit for this unit, and they give a little bit of flexibility in the allotment to their principals. And so I would say, really, when it comes down to it, accountability scores sit on the principal's shoulders in our system. They know their schools, they know their kids, and so making sure that within this we give them some flexibility in not just the categories that we've chosen, but the categories that those principals understand that they need or don't need. Thank you.
Christine?
I want to also thank the committee for the work that they did. A lot of people poured their heart and soul into that, and we appreciate it. I want to thank the community members who supported giving of their time and service as well. This is a difficult position that we are in, very difficult. It's not easy to do, to make these decisions, and my heart really goes out. I've been a recruiter before in my past life, and I always interviewed people to find out why they made a job change or what they were looking for, and very rarely was money the number one reason. It was usually quality of the work environment, opportunity for advancement, culture, things like that. And I think money is super important. I personally would like to give 5% raise to everybody, but the reality is that we are in the midst of cuts, and so to me it seems contrary to give a raise to people during this time. It's something I'm very much struggling with. I want to give 5% to our teachers and staff. They're so valuable to us. But I think that we need to look at making a sacrifice to have the people in place to help in our schools. And if we could save money and keep people more in their jobs, that's what I would be for. And I would just ask that the district, the community, the families would be willing to support that. Again, this is not an easy decision, and my heart goes out to everybody. I know there's been a lot of fear around the positions in the district, and that makes me really sad because we have a great school district. We have fantastic people that are part of this district, and I believe people do make the difference. That's why Cy-Fair is so great. And so I would not be in favor of a pay raise at this point because of the burden that it would probably put on other teachers and the ability to save people's jobs that could help make a difference to our kids.
Todd?
Karen, the 1%, what does that represent? As far, again, just so I'm
A
clear.
1% raise is $9 million.
$9 million. Okay, I just want to, I had a couple observations. One, we're basically losing about $15 million a year right now because kids aren't where they're supposed to be, which is in school.
Correct.
Okay, so I think this goes out to be a call for the community that we need to come together kind of figure this out together. It's going to be painful for, again, there's some painful decisions. I've told people at my campus visits that I'm loyal to people, not so much as loyal to the technology piece, where we can kind of have some cost savings there. So I want to look at that, moving forward year after year. I'm a big proponent. Show me the numbers on the ed tech piece that our scores are increasing by using this technology so early, and I'm not seeing it. So just something to think about moving forward. With the inflation, I want everybody to understand when we're dealing with inflation, hyperinflation. This is an additional tax on the poor, or on the lower income and middle class. I mean, let's just face facts. That's what's going on. It's tough for families right now. It's tough for our teachers. I hear you. I get it. I understand. We'll do everything in our power to help out. I personally am in favor of the 2% increase for our teachers, 1% on admin. So I just want to kind of get that out there. In addition to that, I wanted to thank the committee members as well. That we had, I believe it was 3 long meetings. I wasn't a part of it because of the rules that we have in place with the board members. For the ideas and the effort and just spending time to come up with this. I've just walking around in the community, people asking me questions. It's a concern. No one likes being in this position. I do have a question on the revenue piece. I think this is something that we really should have been exploring even before right now. We have these bonds that the taxpayers of the Cy-Fair community have paid for. Let's look at every single avenue where we can increase revenue. And I can appreciate we don't really have an established baseline, but we do know that we're going to have some increase in revenue by doing that. So I think I've talked to Matt a couple of times as far as with our facilities and renting out I believe we're already doing that with our natatoriums. So I would say our sports facilities as well gives us an opportunity to increase revenue as well. But again, I mean that's my piece is creating revenue. How do we do that? And again, one of the things that popped up was selling of alcohol. I just want to be clear with everyone. We're not going to be selling alcohol at school events. This is, and it's not like we're going to be increasing revenue. We're going to be receiving revenue from the alcohol sales. It's really that we're not able to attract the concerts and the attractions because we don't have the ability to sell alcohol at some of these events, and that would be limited, I believe, to. Are we talking Berry Center and the VPAC? So just wanted to throw that out there as well. But again, parents, call to action. You really want to help out this community. Let's do as good a job as possible as getting the kids to school on a day-to-day basis.
Go ahead, Lucas.
I've got a couple of points that I wanted to finish up with. For the community, all of us we've all been assigned, just for everybody, we've all been assigned different schools to visit. And all of us have been asked to visit new schools to us in many cases. And in each of those schools, all of us asked the principals, what do we need to know to do our job better, generally speaking? And we've all heard from principals. And I want to call a couple ideas out, is that one of the common themes that I heard throughout all of our principals, and I'm looking at one of them right now, is that we need to make site-based recommendations. And so our administration, just out of their good sense, did that really before we even mentioned it to them. It was something that was already in flight. And our principals care about every single person on that campus and about meeting the needs of their kids. And they all face constraints that are challenging, to say the least. to be able to meet the objective of good learning outcomes while still supporting the families that are in their rooms, both of the kids and of the teachers and of the paras and all the admin. So for the community, we're going through questions right now. Dr. Killian is posing the board questions because that's the board's job, is to establish priorities for the administration. And it's the administration's job to take that prioritization and then bring forth a recommendation. And so all of us have met with the administrative staff. I've been a member and led the subcommittee for finance and operations along with Julie and Justin. So as a subcommittee, to all of the participants for the budget reduction workshops and that subcommittee advisory group, thank you so much. Thank you for the time that you spent. I'm looking at some of the stakeholders in the audience and the time that you spent. I came to some of our meetings, and it's a somber discussion. Everybody's trying to figure out how to do the right thing and how do you define what the right thing is. So none of these, when we see you in the community, when we're in the grocery store, when we're at kids' games, when we're, at the bus stop, we have heard from everybody. And the objective for this board is to empower this administration to make a decision that is both difficult and, to my first point, site-based, where administration and our principals understand how to run their own campuses, and they give us guidance on what works best for their needs of their community. So thank you to those that have participated in the process thus far, and for the broader community, our board is partnering with our administration to figure out how best to weigh in, and then our administration is trying to seek the best guidance on how to implement. So with that, I'm done.
Go down.
I was actually a little hesitant to ask the question or make the statement. However, it's a true, honest question to administration. So we're looking for 68 million in savings, and numbers sometimes run. So we said at 0.85 of a fund balance is 85 million, is that right? What was the million?
It's about 80 million.
So we literally have in 0.8, we have sitting in our fund balance enough to cover the savings we're trying to come up with at the point above if we leave the 4 months, that is, I think 3 are recommended, 4 are needed for our budget cycle, right?
Right, but the deficit won't be gone in 1 year. I mean, we're just partially getting, so that deficit will carry over into the next year. So we have to be able to cover some of that the following year too. So if we went down to 4 months in fund balance in 1 year, that would be a concern because we wouldn't have a plan for future years. We would already be at the 4 months. And we would be in a situation if something happened with interest rates or something happened with something else that we would be impacted.
So we already accounted for that in the 64, what was the number Julie had, 64.2 to 68, right? So we had so in our budget number, we already have some contingency, and this is another contingency, is that right?
Well, what I'm explaining is if we go into fund balance 70 million this year, we'll go into fund balance the following year. So that would get us below 4 months in fund balance.
If I don't know if I can speak like this, but effectively, we've got to be able to operationally make sustainable changes right now, so we're not faced with a doubling of this problem next year.
Next year, thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Henry, do you mind if I share real quickly? Mr. Scanlon had asked about our salary comparison.
Go ahead.
And we had already pulled that together for 23-24 with the plan of sharing it in May. But very quickly, I can tell you, like the 0-year starting salary, the only district that was ahead of us was Katy. We were at 62,000. Katy was 62,400. And we were tied with Spring Branch, but everybody else was below us. If I look at the 5-year salary, it was 63,830, and Houston and Katy were above us, but we were above like Klein, Spring Branch, Tomball, Fort Bend, and Aldine. And kind of the same thing for the 10-year. We are at 66,765, And the two districts that were above us, once again, were Houston and Katy, but the rest, we were above. So I thought that might help.
Let me give you another piece of information too. So let's say we didn't do the 2% this year, and next year, let's say we made the $50 million worth instead of the 68 million, right? So that's all of the other budget cuts. So we would have to make an $88 million cut next year and again, not do a raise in order to balance the budget. So.
Thank you very much, Karen. And I know we have 3 more topics to go over. It just sounds like the consensus from the board at this point is the 2% with the 1%. I'm on board with that at this point, but we'll make that decision. I'm also concerned as well, home values might be going back down, so that could affect as well our revenue going forward. So, Dr. Kelly, want to go to the next option?
Yeah, so the next thing is really right now we are transporting pretty much everybody inside the 2-mile limit. Is that correct, Matt?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what we have in front of you is a reduction of that to go to a
2 mile for high school and middle school and 1 mile for elementary.
and a pretty restrictive piece for hazardous routes.
Very objective hazardous plan. Yes, sir.
So we want to kind of give the board a little bit of opportunity to talk about that. Now, this is apparently something we did in the past when we had budget cuts before, where we reduced the amount of coverage. 2-mile limit is normally what it is. And in deference to one of our speakers today, yeah, we do know that there's lots of traffic. There are a lot of issues with routes and the danger and all that. And so we do acknowledge that, and that is a concern for us as well. And how much are we looking at in terms of the reduced ridership in terms of the savings?
Reduced ridership?
Yeah, I mean, not reduced ridership, I mean reduced
Budget
riding.
savings?
Yeah.
8.2 million.
8.2 million, and that's best case, right?
That's best case. Yes, sir.
Okay. And what would you say would be more probable?
Well, a lot of this is going to be through attrition. And then it really depends on where we land with the hazardous route plan.
Right.
If we add more routes back, it will eat away at the savings, which is what happened in 2009, 2010.
Last time, yeah.
So I would say worst case, or probably worst case, about 6 million if we don't get too carried away with the hazardous route plan.
Gotcha. Okay. So just wanted to, because ultimately, this would take a change in our policy for the way we transport kids, so, in our practice. So just wondering what the board says on the transportation concerns and whether or not we need to go a different direction or whatever. But we stopped short of obviously moving to a 2-mile limit for elementary kids because we thought, no, that's going to be too hazardous and there'd be too many issues. And so that's kind of where we landed. Do you want to give any information about why we?
Well, when we met with the Budget Reduction Committee, we proposed a 2-mile with hazardous plan, which we had implemented in 2009, 2010. We proposed a 2-mile with no hazardous, a 1-mile with no hazardous, and then a hybrid of a 2-mile for secondary and a 1-mile for elementary. And the committee recommended the hybrid with some consideration for hazardous conditions.
I have a question. Matt, do you know how many students would be impacted by these cuts?
I do. Could we forward the slides? Or I have a slide that kind of gives you an idea of what was presented to the committee and what the impact was. It's going to be past this. One more. So these are the options that were presented to the Budget Reduction Committee. 2-mile without hazardous, 1-mile plan, 2-mile plan, and a hybrid plan. With the hybrid plan, we would impact a total of 41,044 students. That's not necessarily riders, that's just the number of students within those areas. And as you can see, 2 mile with hazardous, as we had implemented in 2009, was not a significant savings. 1 mile was not a significant savings. The biggest savings was the 2 mile plan. That's why the committee recommended the hybrid. We realized some savings, but we still provided transportation for elementary within 1 mile, or outside of 1 mile. And with this plan, we would reduce the number of buses by 133 buses.
So with that, we're seeking a little bit of information and opinion that's from the board, so we can move forward with building that budget around transportation too.
Go ahead, Todd.
Matt, are we currently, I mean, obviously we have all these, wonderful buses that we have. Are we doing anything to maybe rent these out to private companies on the weekends or when they're not in use?
No, sir, we don't rent buses out for private use. We have a 12-year replacement cycle, so once it hits 12 years, we do an auction, but we do not lease them out.
Any other questions?
So one of the thoughts I have, so the entire Cypher community is used to not having to be beholden to the 2 mile rule. So this would be a pretty dramatic change to Cypher families. Has there been any data on school districts that have made this change and has the fact that school bus routes have been reduced, has that contributed to truancy or anything? Because we are talking about that 2% drop. So we were talking about a 2% decrease in attendance, which is contributing to our budget concerns. Do we think, is there any data or have we evaluated a reduction in bus service would exacerbate that or contribute to that in any way?
I suspect that it'll contribute to a decline in ADA initially. We're one of the few districts in the state that transports within 2 miles because it's not funded. Most districts, it's 2 miles. And so when we went to the model we did in 2009, I think we had a 0.2% decrease in ADA. So I think initially there would definitely be a decrease in ADA, but the communities around us have adjusted.
Sure. So have any other districts gone through this process and that we can study, especially data like that? That would be very important to know because, for instance, there could be a hypothetical that if we did have a drop in ADA, it could wipe out the cost savings.
Absolutely. Dr. Smith, are you aware of any districts that have made this transition, and do you have any data to share?
I do know that some districts up in North Texas did this back in 2009-10 when we had to cut within 2 mile and go hazardous. But some school districts cut regular ed service across the board. Some did a pay-to-ride system, but very quickly, most of those school districts added bus service back. Now, I don't have the data right in front of me. I don't know if those directors are still in those school districts, but I do know that every district that I know of that cut service back in 9-10 has added that service back.
Within 2 miles?
Not within 2 miles, but I'm talking about just cutting service entirely. Any services they cut, they added back. We are one of the only school districts that do provide service within 2 miles for all students.
We can look into that, Mr. Ray, and do a little more research.
Yeah, that is something that would be very important for us to understand because, again, going back to what I was saying earlier, I mean, Cypher families have come accustomed to this. Some people in Cypher have probably moved to Cypher because of that. They've probably chosen their home location. I'm not saying that I'm opposed to it. I mean, we do have real budget constraints. I would like to know a little bit more before we make such a dramatic change. And again, it seems like we could be like a case study of what happens for a large school district that goes from the 2 mile to not implementing a 2 mile rule to a 2 mile rule. So we'd be the guinea pig, and then we would be the test case for how it impacts.
We did this before, Matt, and maybe Dr.
That would be
Kane,
helpful
you
to know.
were-
Did we have any
Yeah, that's
data
what I'm
on
saying.
that?
We
We have attendance data.
yeah.
So in 2009, 2010, we did go to what would be the 2-mile with hazardous plan, and we had a .2 reduction in ADA that year. It went from
Okay.
96 to
90
95.8.
Yeah, that was my initial question at the very beginning, if there was some data on that. So we do have some data that shows that it did drop, but it did
went
not,
right
it does not
back
appear that it
up.
dropped so much that it would eradicate the savings that we could possibly save.
It went down in 2008-9, and then it went right back up to averaging 96%.
Good.
The difference with that plan, though, is that we only impacted about 14 routes,
Approximately, yes, sir.
approximately 14 routes.
So it's kind of an apples and oranges
It's an
situation.
apples and oranges situation.
Okay, but what we did determine is there was a correlation between reducing bus routes and average daily attendance.
Temporarily, and then
Okay.
it went back up.
Okay.
Maybe you could correlate if it's 14 routes and we're cutting,
133.
I mean, you may be able to correlate, not precisely, but might be able to get you something that we project that it will impact it, but I don't know that it would wipe it out based on the numbers that I'm hearing.
I don't think it would wipe it out. If ADA goes down 1%, it's definitely it would probably be temporary until families adjust, because there will be additional traffic in the area. But other districts transport are outside of 2 miles, and we'd have a comparable, I would hope, and comparable ADA to Katy or the surrounding districts.
That helps.
Dr. Killian, and I'm directing it towards you, but making it available to any of the team members. So if we, and I've heard this from some of our principals, if we were to do this, the follow-on effect is that car rider line increases a lot. And the time required to get kids onto and, into school and away from school, getting them back into their cars goes up, which means teachers would have to stay later.
Yeah, there is definitely that potential.
Yep.
Obviously, the other thing too, with 2-mile limits too, is having a carpool. That generally mitigates some of that, because people can't wait in those lines when they get too long, and so try to make partners to take kids to school and all that kind of stuff. So if they're going to do car rider lines.
Yeah. This, the elephant in the room is that this would be extremely disruptive to families. But not just to families that are trying to figure out how to get their kid out of school, but also to the schools themselves and teachers having to stay later on top of what they're already
Potentially,
doing.
yeah.
To be able to support getting those kids back in their cars.
Correct.
Is there can we support a parallel discussion with reducing minutes during the day, or trying to find a way to reduce some of the impact back to those teachers?
You mean instructional minutes? Is that what you're talking
I'm
about?
not certain. I don't want to overextend my recommendation, but I just want to see, among the administration team, can y'all guys talk about what the teacher impact would be? And is there any way that we could try to mitigate some of that impact if we were to do something like this?
For duty and things like that?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we can have that discussion for sure.
Yeah, it's just, we heard from one of our teachers who made a comment about, bell rings, I've got 30 minutes to walk across campus, get my lunch, come back and go.
Right.
That's a day in life. And the reality is that this time isn't going to just poof come from nowhere. It's going to come from teachers, and they're going to have to manage it with their existing responsibilities. How do we reconcile all of it?
Right. At the same time, you go back to what Natalie was talking about with trying to meet more rigorous requirements on the testing and all that, so.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be an interesting discussion.
So, sir, when we're talking about, what's the percentage ridership we have right now among, we'll break it up a little bit, elementary schools? Do you have that number-ish?
I don't have it broken down in my head by each group, but it's about 70% total across the district. ride our buses.
And if we were to say that we're going to, all the children that are impacted by this potential plan, how many kids do you think is made up by elementary schools?
By the students who would be impacted by this specifically, with the hybrid plan at 17,651 elementary students, I would take about
a third of it?
About half of them. It would be about half the elementary students.
Who was in the room when they were discussing this? Matt, was this your area when the?
It was.
What were some of the discussion topics from the subcommittee regarding how to evaluate this decision, how they prioritized it?
Well, obviously, we were looking for a large dollar amount to make an impact or a dent, but the same concerns that the board has expressed, impact on ADA, traffic concerns. I mean, right now, we can pull at a new school about 110 cars off the street. If that school probably also has 10 to 14 buses, so that was a big concern. Safety of children and not having a hazardous condition plan, walking along busy thoroughfares or crossing railroad tracks, all the things that we've discussed here and in the past as far as hazardous and how it's safe to get a child to school.
For me personally, this one is really tough because the time to get 60 kids into, let's just say, car ridership, pair up, best case scenario, we've got 30 cars for 60 kids. The time to get those 2 kids into 30 cars is exponentially larger than getting those 60 kids onto the same bus. And, right? And then never mind the safety components of all those little bodies running around trying to get on and off a car and the chaos that's just going to ensue versus, and I don't know how many of y'all, well, most of our audience right now are teachers. I can look around the room and I see them, or principals. So they know and I'll use the term organized chaos of kids getting onto buses. It looks like chaos, but it's actually pretty orderly. I don't have a concern about safety for those kids.
Our principals do an amazing job.
Yeah.
Getting those buses filled every afternoon quickly so we can get to our next campuses. They do.
And then all the families that, most of our families in these times in our economy, it's 2-parent working households. So them trying to figure out how they're going to get kids to and from school and do joint ridership. This one's really hard for me to support.
There is some data from the American School Bus Safety Council that for every route or run, in this instance, that you cut, you're adding up to 45 more cars on the roadway. So that is one of the things that we discuss in the committee, that traffic would be definitely impacted. And I always equate it to look at what traffic looks like on the first day of school. Because a lot, especially of our elementary babies, they may not ride the bus the first day of school.
Right.
Mom and dad may bring them. And that may be something that would be more normal, if you will, if service is cut. So that's going to be one of the things that we'd have to prepare for.
Yep. Okay.
One of the bigger concerns, or a big concern, were the late buses as well. You asked what the committee discussed. Late buses in relation to athletics and tutoring, that was another concern that they had. That's part of the transportation cut, the 10 million total.
That, I understand. And that one I can wrap my brain around. It's more difficult because it is students in athletics, students that are getting tutoring, your more at-risk students are using that service. But it's still a smaller percentage of the bulk of overall students that are consuming the service on a normal time in, normal time out. Yeah, I already know what all my community feedback is on this point, and it's not supportive. But I understand that it is still one of the larger line items that's possible for savings. And the simple fact is that we've got to figure out how do we make reductions that are sustainable. But I'm still not there.
Would it be helpful to define hazardous route and maybe do one more slide? So I'd asked Dr. Smith and his team to come up with an objective hazardous route plan. The one that the board currently approves can be subjective. So this is what they came up with. Transportation will be provided for elementary and middle school students if crossing a 6-lane roadway with a speed limit over 45 miles per hour, a tollway, a state highway, or a farm-to-market road. Transportation will be provided to elementary students that would be required to walk alongside a 6-lane roadway with a speed limit over 45, tollway, state highway, or farm-to-market road. We could expand upon that if the board would like. I know we're still looking for budget cuts. My only caution is that the more hazardous conditions that you add, the more subjective it becomes.
I would be more in favor of a fund balance move than I would of this right now. That's just me. And I actually don't think that's a smart decision, to be quite honest. I'm trying to wrap my brain around. I'm at the bus stop every morning, so I feel this one. But it's not about me. It's not about my kid. It's about all kids. But it's, what we did it to increase our attendance. We did it to increase our safety. We did it to give families better time management. And if we undo this, we move that cost burden back to the families, which can be done. Fully get it. Can be done. Yeah, I'm just not there yet.
Go ahead, Todd.
I just have to say, I'm concerned about those kids that need the tutoring. I mean, the whole purpose of us doing this is to increase test scores and competency, and in addition to that, I know there's a lot of kids that are at risk. I'm a big sports guy, and I just know how important it is to have these kids have access to that after school run. So I just from personal experience growing up, these kids need these programs. They need them. They need access to them, and we need to support them.
Go ahead, Julie.
Dr. Killian, my recommendation would be for Matt and Dr. Smith and your team to look at expanding the hazardous conditions plan to ensure that we address children who are crossing railroad tracks, some of the areas that may not be 6-lane, but they're 4-lane and there's no sidewalks or there's no shoulder. So I would like to see that expanded and then see what the impact is on the cost savings. And then when it comes to late buses, I agree that late buses provide a key opportunity to provide tutoring services to students and to ensure that students stay active and involved in not just athletics, but fine arts. But maybe there's an opportunity to modify that rather than just getting rid of them altogether. Could we reduce them? Maybe, we don't have quite as many stops or things like that. It's like so not just getting rid of them altogether or keeping all of them, looking at how we can maybe reduce the number of them so we're still providing that if possible.
Yes, ma'am.
You're welcome.
I actually have one more thing maybe I can bring on. I recognize that we say that we got to make a budget cut right now. We have to figure out what the plan's going to be right now. And so based on that, we're going to not consider our revenue generation opportunities. Sometimes when I do cost benefit, I look at, well, what's more likely than not? What's more in our control than not? Do we have any input here among our recommendations for either cost savings from the community or revenue recommendations that would say, this is definitely in our control, it's likely, it's a reasonable thing that we can implement? Is there anything here that gives us a sense of we're going to make $8 million or $10 million somewhere else?
Teresa?
just don't know. I mean, really, realistically, without a track record, we can.
Yeah, that's
we can
fair.
throw a number
That's
out there,
fair.
but
That's totally fair.
that's really the issue.
Yeah, that's fair.
And what I was hanging on with the revenue generators was next year at this time, when we're talking about a potential budget deficit, we'll have a track record to show you and say, you know what, we don't need to make that many cuts because this additional revenue.
Okay, that's fair. That's a fair statement.
May I just add a comment too? Just another reminder, there is $30 million that someone could authorize to send to us that would cover this cost.
That's fair
Ideally
too.
before May, when we have to, or June, when we have to actually vote on this budget. It'd be helpful to know if that $30 million is coming, because that would cover this so that we would not have children walking to school in the dark or in the rain, early in the morning, crossing railroad tracks, et cetera. So this could be avoided if we get our information and our money back in time.
And just for the community, 60, what's our free and reduced lunch rate? It's about 60%. And so from that, you've got children that are in our after-school programs, athletics, et cetera. And any participation in after-school activities is the strongest indicator of academic success and graduation. So the ability to support our kiddos being able to access those programs that would not otherwise be able to do so, it shows up in another statistic called graduation rate. And it's not a direct line. You can't see it, but it's there. So, Julie, to your point, yeah, you're absolutely right. And being able to find out if we can get some form of, get that optional homestead exemption monies back, the 50%, that would be helpful. It's just a sidebar, yeah.
Would it be possible for some of these students that may need some additional help, where we could, maybe ask for some donations from our own community members and say, hey, look, for at-risk kids and maybe to help offset some costs? Is that possible? I mean,
We certainly could. We just couldn't use it in terms of our budget estimates,
So Matt, I have a question for you. We know that 100% of kids are able to take the bus. You have the system where you badge them on and badge them off. What percentage of those kids are actually taking the bus today?
Well, we're transporting about 85,000 students per day.
That's correct. 85,000, so about 70% of our student population, right?
70%. So if you make these changes as recommended, what will that percentage go down to?
We would be transporting 44,000 children, so it'd be
Cut it in half.
almost half.
Okay, thank you.
one last thing on I'm sorry. Well, again, if I'm understanding this correctly, for 1 point drop in student attendance, we're talking $7.5 million. This is not going to help us maintain, our student attendance where we're at now. Cost savings benefit on doing this. I mean, if we could get the community even buy in and help us gain 1 point, and we add additional $7.5 million, will that cover it?
I mean, almost, but we've been doing an attendance push this year, and what's our increase in attendance versus last year?
I don't have that number, but let me get it. It's a slight increase, if that. Let me pull it up right now.
Like a fraction?
Yes, and I will say that the community campuses, there's a huge attendance initiative to get students to come to school at all levels.
I'm just speaking as a parent right now. If I were to see an email go out on a week-to-week basis on where we're at, just to kind of just reiterate the importance of our kids showing up to class, if it's not being done already, but really to just kind of have a grading system or attaboy, attagirl. This is some significant money we're talking about here. So
Campuses receive their daily attendance every day. They receive acknowledgments, certificates at the end of every 6-week period. Campuses are giving pizza parties, calling home, congratulating kids, having grade level competitions from our ALCs through our high schools. So they have really been pushing. I'm not saying we can't continue and do more, but it is an entire community initiative right now to increase the attendance.
I know we do a good job on Twitter or X, where we're sending out updates, and I've even done that a couple of times when I get messages out. I love to see 93, 94% attendance rate. That's awesome. I know it kind of slips as the year moves on, but again, reiterate the importance. Is like, look, hey, your teachers that are with your kids, 7-8 hours a day. I mean, it matters.
I agree.
We need to do our job as best as possible as parents to get our kids to school on a day-to-day basis.
I wasn't going to start with my comment here, but I have a senior. Seniors are a little bit less eager to get to school every day, and I was trying to come up with a dollar figure for my very own daughter. I said, do you realize, and she loves her teachers at Awesome Langham Creek High School, so I said, do you realize I listed their names? They get paid anyway, so you're costing the district, and I don't actually know that figure. What does it cost a day when a kid misses? Does it make sense? And so I do think we could do another more interesting job of communicating. Maybe it's a board function, exactly the cost that's there, and maybe that's where you charge people. We'll give you free buses, but if you're not here, we're going to charge you a fee. I know that's not realistic, but my point is really understanding that our fixed costs are there. My daughter was surprised to hear that. So she's getting get to school message, but she's not understanding. She's costing the system dollars, but also parents can understand that. But I also think that comes down to choice. COVID changed everything. School was a given. You didn't ever even think you didn't have to go to the school building to learn, and school was not optional, and our whole culture shifted. And so now it's about creating those opportunities that make those kids who are reticent to come, making sure we're keeping our, the movie theater they want to go to. So I just think that's also a place for us to continue to iterate and to create options that bring kids with excitement into school, all kids. And the ones that aren't attending, figure out why and figure out what we can do. I also think community partners like Hair Grove Elementary is adopted by 2 churches in the Copperfield area, and those men build bikes every month to make sure there's a bike there the kids have as a incentive for they're in the drawing for attendance and other things they do. So there's also creative incentives for younger kids. So I do think, but I just want to ask a question I asked of you guys earlier. At this point, I know we provide a route for every kid, but we know they won't. So can you talk a little bit about our buses full right now? Like, is this a real, or we do have extra spaces we could have reduced without actually taking away routes?
Generally, at the beginning of the year, what we have to do is, since we route everybody on a bus, knowing that not everybody will ride, we have to basically guesstimate the percentage of ridership. I can say in my 6 years as a director here, we've never cut a bus. We've been adding. And generally what you'll see the first couple months of school, we are balancing, doing our best to move stops from one bus to another so we don't have to add, so we can be as efficient as possible. But we're adding at the very beginning of the school year.
So there are no savings to be found in being more efficient, is what you're saying.
Right, and we cut 100 bus routes, what was that, 2 years ago, I believe it was, when we moved from a 3-tier system to a 4-tier system. We went from 770 bus routes down to 670 bus routes. So that brought us more efficiency, and yet we're still transporting the same number of students, if not more, than we were prior to that.
Thank you. And then I would say safety is our first job, so we can do our main job of educating kids. So have you got, Matt, back in the time we had to cut before, did we have any statistics or any kind of incidental information about students and their safety on the way to school? Anything, crime or accidents?
Just thinking back, I don't think there was a significant increase, but then again, we only cut 14 routes. So it wasn't as much of a reduction as it would be this time.
Then a follow-up question is, a lot of campuses with Title I dollars fund their after-school buses through some choice dollars, but it's also a supplement issue, so I wouldn't want us to take our schools with our neediest population having sort of less funds to do other things. What percentage of those after-school buses are Title dollars versus budgeted dollars from the campus?
Right now, none of them are title dollars, correct?
Only the elementary tutorial routes, elementary Saturday school routes are funded through title dollars. All the other late runs for secondary are all budgeted dollars.
Interesting.
We did
Well,
discuss an option where the high schools could fund with Title I funds for late routes. We looked at that option.
Was there much, and what would it take away from? I guess, and you don't have to answer now, but I just question,
There would
what
be an
would that take
opportunity
away from
cost.
if it's interventions or, right, what they currently spend on?
Other than taking the recommendation for the committee, we really haven't looked into it, but there would be an opportunity cost for the campus.
But not all of the high schools have Title I money.
Exactly.
We're just now adding Title I money to our high schools.
Right.
And how many high schools would get title money?
6, is that correct, Ashley? Right, but there'll be a total of about 6 or 7 this next year.
Gotcha.
But then again, supplements a plan because the needs are so high instructionally in a school where there's, when you qualify for Title I, that carries its other challenges. So I would have that concern. So I think I would echo what Julie's thoughts about looking at the hazardous routes. Those are pretty restrictive, seeing them there. But I also understand there had to be a line somewhere. And what I've seen in other systems is cottage industries raise up. You get more kids in your before-school program. You get more private buses that drive kids. And so I think parents find a way. But to me, to the point that was made by my colleague, I would less like to see this than I would us go after other points of attendance and other ways to save, just because safety is a key concern.
I found the attendance data for you. The overall rate for this reporting period, the 6 weeks, was 93.47, and it's an increase of 0.18% of this time last year. But the campus goals that we set this year is to have a 95% attendance rate for every campus. So the 6 weeks, we had 34 campuses that surpassed the 95%. And that's how we're keeping, they are acknowledged, we share it and celebrate it, but we're watching that data very carefully.
But overall was only a 0.18% increase over last year.
Correct.
Okay.
Go ahead, Justin.
I'm going to make a recommendation as well. So, of course, all budget cuts are unpopular. I'm concerned that implementing a 1 to 2 mile bus route rule would dance in the realm of wildly unpopular amongst the community. Because what I'm hoping we're able to accomplish through some of these discussions in our budget cuts is that we're able to find budget cuts that won't diminish the value of being in Cyfair ISD. And I'm concerned that this one would actually cut towards actually undermining our value of attending Cyfair schools. This is one of the value propositions that we bring, and we're in an increasingly competitive school environment. We're competing with, private schools and homeschool, other school districts and things like that. And so we need to be able to provide all of the value that we can to make sure that people know it's maintained and well known that Cypher ISD is the best place to send your kids. And this is one of the things that we do to actually further that goal. So I'm concerned that, this budget cutting route and this budget cutting discussion kind of undermines that a little bit. And so we need to be cognizant of that. Again, numbers are numbers. We have to do what we have to do. But I want us to be aware that my goal is to identify budget cuts that are not going to undermine us as a competitive school district and a competitive school choice. So with that being said, I would like to echo my colleague Julie's recommendation. I would like to reevaluate the hazardous conditions to see if we can broaden that a little bit, look at the numbers. Maybe some additional recommendations that can be brought forth before the board is to, we have the 2 mile and 1 mile as proposed now. Perhaps a 2 mile and 1 mile proposal with an increase in hazardous conditions, possibly even taking it one step further and doing a 1 mile and a 1 mile as well. Let's look at a couple of different options. And then ultimately what we need to determine is, because this will be burdensome to a percentage of our community, right? Let's see if that dollar amount actually justifies that. And so we need to be able to look at all of those things. And so I'd like to see, to Julie's point, a couple of additional recommendations on the hazardous conditions, and maybe even a 1 mile and a 1 mile option as well. Let's see how many students would be impacted by all those and what the cost savings would be. And I think that would help us make a decision, because I think there's a level of unease with this. And so we need to have all the data before we make a really tough decision on something like this.
And I do believe the 1 mile plan was.
But it didn't have hazardous conditions.
hazardous.
And I think it was about 1.7 for 1 mile to 1 mile, but that was without hazardous conditions. So I think it sounds like we need to go back and look at, that the board wants more hazardous conditions defined, and we'll bring that back to you.
That's going to cut into what we're saying.
We'll work something out.
Sure. Yeah.
So it sounds like you have some homework, and so it's superintendent to find more budget
I wrote
cuts.
homework down here, too.
Exactly. You want to continue on with maybe find some other ways to find more money
Yeah.
on number 3?
Yeah, actually, I want to skip down to the last question on the slide real quick. So as you know, we've got a school potentially that is opening for next year, so Byrd Elementary School. We just selected the namesake. So one of the options that I wanted to throw out there for you to consider is delaying that opening. So I'd like to show you some data on the screen if I could get the chart back up. Yeah, I'm not. Do I have to? Yeah, it doesn't let me. Oh. Okay.
Next. One more the other way.
I don't see it up here. If they could put it on the.
Just take the wheel.
I don't have it.
There it is.
There you go. Okay, can I get that on the front screen too?
There you go.
Thank you very much. All right, so just to give you a little bit of background here, I think I need to go one more back, don't I? No, actually, this is the one I wanted to start with. Okay, so wanted to give you some cost estimates for what this potential savings would be in the delayed opening of Byrd Elementary School. But I also want to show you, because staff did an outstanding job today, trying to add some other issues that you needed to be aware of before you give us some feedback on this. So staff are opening a new elementary school, about 1.4, and that is outside of the teacher costs. So we're already assuming that we're going to have to increase teachers for the enrollment increase in our district. This is specifically for instance, AP, nurse, counselor, all the additional staffing that comes with opening an elementary school outside of just the teaching staff, right? So that's roughly 1.4 million in terms of cost reduction if we don't open the school. Now, one thing, we have hired a principal at this point for that new school, so that's one piece that we would not go back on. We've already got that person selected, but we'd be able to use that person for something else until that school opens up. The other thing is generally utilities and grounds costs. We're going to have to cut a lot more space, so all those kinds of things would have to go into it. Custodial, about $187,000 for the additional custodians. Obviously, we wouldn't have to clean them on a regular basis, even though we'd be complete with the school. And then you can see transportation wouldn't be a cost, but then additional portables would take away from some of the savings, right, for the cost savings. So let me show you a little bit more about that. So, all right, so here's some of the issues that we would have to do. So we'd need some more portables in schools if we didn't open Byrd this next school year. We need the 4 additional there, and then all these additional portables at these other schools. So that's going to entail a cost. So anywhere between, what did we say, about $45,000 is what we landed on to move portables to these facilities. So you can multiply that number by 45,000. So that's about $450,000 worth of additional costs that we would have to put portables in there, so we wouldn't have to utilize this facility for a year. In addition, oh, shoot, that's about it. We just summarized it, didn't we? You guys did a great job cutting that down for me. There was a lot more busyness when we looked this morning, so. Oh, shoot. Okay. I just lost it. Okay, so here becomes the big strain. One more, and then it gives you the other one, yeah. Okay. So this was our enrollment projection as of 2024 snapshot for next year, assuming that we're opening Byrd Elementary. So you can see that it's going to come in with about 879 students, and you can see how that that impacts the enrollments of the other campuses. So they have to go somewhere, or they have to stay somewhere, and this is what happens with that piece if you don't add that in. So you can see that it goes up a little bit more in McGowan. Yeah, and Wells is quite up there. So, yeah, I just wanted to give you the idea. And the reason why I put it up there is because if we don't explore it, someone will be critical of the fact that we didn't look at maybe delaying a facility's opening as a cost savings measure. So with that, obviously, we would also delay opening a pre-K program at Wells because we simply do not have space there. Is that correct? Is that what we decided? And we would put it somewhere else.
We could consider Pope Elementary for moving the pre-K program.
So, does that impact those numbers at all? Or is that really the number, 1,565 students?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
If we don't,
In this scenario,
that actually delays the
Wells
pre-K.
pre-K would stay at McGowan.
Got you, okay.
And we could try to give McGowan some relief by considering moving pre-K to Pope.
I think the bigger issue there, obviously, is Wells is quite full.
Correct.
It's huge.
We could do,
So I'll just go back to this slide here. Oop, I went too far. Current enrollment, I went the wrong way, sorry about that. That kind of shows you the savings, but remember too that we will have to have additional portables to take care of this, so that number of saving about 1.3, we would lose some money there. So with that, just wondering what say y'all about delaying the opening of Byrd Elementary School for 1 year?
Let me ask about the portables in particular. Are these portables that we would need in the future and be able to repurpose?
Great point. Actually, these portables would come from other places in the district. So the interesting conversation we had was, do we have enough at other places to be able to pull from? Because specifically, these elementary portables have to have restroom facilities for elementary kids, and we'd have to look at that. Were all able to determine that you could find enough to support this?
We have enough identified. I think Mr. Tucker has to go out and determine if those portables are currently being used for other purposes. But just looking through our spreadsheet, I think we have enough.
Okay. The one thing that I would just caution you about was one of the things that we were counting on was moving portables from these schools that were getting relief, and now they're not getting relief. So we have to go find those portables at other places. So, and we have portables in the district, we just don't necessarily have portables that have restrooms in them, and that's the kicker for elementary school.
So help me just understand a little bit clearer what goes into the costs of the $360,000. If we have the portables, is it retrofitting them, moving them, everything associated? What goes into the $360,000 if we already have the portables?
You're talking about moving, you're talking about putting the canopies in, the sidewalks, the ramps, all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And then you're going to go in there and hook them up, make sure you have all the technology infrastructure to them, all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And if there's a permitting cost, but I don't think we have a permitting cost. Do we have a permitting cost?
We have a permitting cost.
So we
It's
also
just
have a
with the
permitting
county.
cost to add them. So does this dollar amount include all of that?
Yes, that's, to move a portable, it's about $45,000, and we would be required to move 8 portables. So that 360
Gotcha.
Covers it all.
Question. We have, I really love the way we've designed our new schools. They have a lot of like flex spaces and shared spaces and I know I was on a campus visit, and I won't say the name, so everyone won't be mad at them, but they've taken some shared spaces and really used them in creative ways, maybe not for actual classrooms, but for intervention spaces. So I'm wondering if we walked these, as a principal, I gave my report, and I like my spaces, but I'm saying, are these true? Are there other spaces that could be repurposed? I don't like teachers on carts ever, but are these absolutely needed to accomplish those portables absolutely needed? Or is there any space on a campus that could be repurposed for a year and be a great learning space still? Or maybe other, like small group pull out or something that's using a regular sized classroom that could maybe be pulled into more of a, we could kind of retrofit a shared space?
I think the campus principals would tell you that we're pretty strict on that, and we actually have members of school leadership and then Mr. Tucker actually go out and walk the campuses to look for all of those spaces that could be converted into classroom space, and they really exhaust all of that before we approve the additional portable.
Thank you.
Just say that I would be very cautious with the numbers that we were looking at in some of these. Yeah, I just can't see that there'd be much space for anything left in a campus with 1,500 kids in it. It's well over 100% capacity. So, and I mean, yeah, 100 or 1,471 too would be well over capacity. Yeah, and 1,338 is pretty high too, so.
I just feel like I need to chime in on this. The other thing that you really have to consider when enrollment reaches that level are their large group areas, because they still are only accommodating to so many students in the cafeteria, in the gyms, in the music, in the art, in those large group areas. So it does
Lunch at
create some
10 a.m.,
additional challenges.
like our high schools. I know Springs has to start pretty early.
Those excellent points.
Well, it just goes without saying almost. But, you know, at that point, like for Wells, their APs would, and their principal would simply be strained, is putting it kindly, to be able to do the teacher evaluations, to do what is important for helping early teachers become better teachers, evaluating teachers to give them reasonable professional development opportunities. Wow. I mean, post-MIP, same. So it's, in my time in the schools, that's where our counselors, that's where our APs, that's where our principals, you know, they're responsible for growing our teachers as one of their responsibilities. And when you're that constrained, a lot of that just, there's not enough time. That's the reality of it. So there's a trade-off.
Yeah, and I would also point to, if you look at this staff saving, then probably what's going to happen, just playing off of what you're saying, is we're going to have requests for some additional staff in some of those really highly populated schools where they're going to ask for an extra unit here and there, which is going to erode some of that savings.
Dr. Killian, my recommendation would be that we do not delay the opening of Byrd Elementary.
Sounds like consensus is anyway, plus with the other recommendation, I think it's 1.2 million, so kind of a wash in those two numbers anyway.
And I would also say with a new neighborhood building and stuff, for families to have another delay of where they would settle in and be part of a school community and a community, I'm not sure that that also brings value.
So this is one reason why I skipped over to this piece, because now I go back to the kind of the final question here. So in looking at the BRAC committee's recommendations on cost savings, you've had those, and then also we sent you kind of the draft list that we were working from for the 68 million that's a lot more inclusive of a lot of other positions. So that's one reason why we were at 69 million or so, and then now we're eating away at that savings because we're looking at a transportation plan that's probably not going to be, it's going to be a lot less impactful. We're talking about not doing anything with Bird, obviously, so we're not going to see any additional savings there. And then the pay, obviously the pay increase, we've got our feedback on that piece. But with that, are there any other recommendations or for either admin or BRAC that you see that we might need to reconsider now? But remember, you've already reduced some things. So in terms of what I will do, and I want to tell this to the community too, and for our staff members, so ultimately I'm going to make the staffing decisions, right? So, because that's what I'm charged with to staff schools, and I'm going to be held accountable for that. So I've been listening, and I've been seeing the comments that have been sending forward, and I think Natalie alluded to giving voice and choice to principals. That's one thing that I'm going to do with their piece. I'm going to do what they suggested is going to be my number one priority for whatever cuts we do to campuses are going to be based on what they said, and then giving them some type of choice. So if we did, for instance, cut, and I'm really apprehensive about sharing this, but if we cut a certain position, because I don't want to freak people out about things. So there was something said about, we've had some communications, I'm just going to say, we had some communications about college and career counselor, and there was some concern about that piece, or college and career specialist. If we did anything like that, my compunction would be to go, all right, we're going to reduce these 2 slots, and then we're going to give you a flex position, and you pick which one makes more sense for your campus. That's where I would go with that kind of piece going forward. So there would be some of that flexibility and site-based decision making. Anyway, but are there any things out there that you saw on the list, personal or non-personal, I guess, that you want to bring forward for discussion, concern? Knowing that they're all of concern, by the way.
I'll go ahead and start, because no one wants to talk, because these are hard conversations to have, right? Sorry? I have a question on the cost savings recommendation that was made on by the Budget Reduction Advisory Committee. It was ranked number 17, so it was low, but it said reduce college and career specialist positions. But the spreadsheet that we saw, the cost savings there was eliminating the position. So is it reduce or eliminate? It's okay. Yes.
There was, you mean from the spreadsheet that was sent to you versus?
Yeah, this one. The one from the committee, not the one that Dr. Killian sent.
Okay. On this, reduced college and career specialist positions, it was depending on the number of allocations that each campus had. You know, some may have, were some with a grant fund funded with that. It was basically eliminating the position because the standard staff allocation is 1 per campus.
Okay.
But I do think, am I correct, or there was confusion of the committee with the college academy, some of those positions, but I think those are grant funded or paid with a different funding source.
The mentor, they all have a college academy mentor. That's basically a temporary position, and that is grant funded.
Right. So the board has received several emails regarding feedback on this from across the district. And one thing that we know that our school districts are measured on at the state level in the state accountability system is our CCMR rating. So that is preparing our students to be college, career, or military ready. So I see great value in these positions, particularly with the investment that we've made in the College Academy. These positions support our College Academy students to a great extent. I guess a question I would ask is, would there be a possibility, rather than eliminating all those positions, that they be shared, that we look at providing maybe 4 that then would have 3 campuses each, so that they could still host career fairs and college fairs and advise on College Academy. And maybe they're housed at those campuses that have the greatest need for support, because maybe those campuses that have the most, the largest student population were their first generation graduates, or their first first generation graduates, that they're housed on those campuses, but then they may be shared with maybe a campus that already has a high level of college acceptance. Just as a way of not eliminating the position completely, but reducing and sharing.
Right.
Just a thought.
Absolutely. I'm making note of it because, so we differentiate some of the staffing based on
Student population,
yeah.
yes.
First-time college goers and all that. Yeah, I get it.
And maybe where we have low College Academy participation, where those campuses where College Academy is already well established, they may already have some systems in place to support those students. So then that way it would, but they're still being provided the service, it's just not with a full-time person on campus every day.
Right. Made note of that.
Sure. Thank you, Julie. I would like to, actually, to me, that begs for some data, because to me, getting kids college, career, or military ready is our whole job, making sure they can read and do that. And so I think this role, I'm not sure if, because Linda just mentioned the College Academy person is a little different. I just really would like to know some statistics about what's happening, what's coming out, what are they doing, and what are those statistics in these positions per the campuses. And so I think not just the number at the schools with the most at-risk or first-generation population, but in general, what are we getting out of that? Because it is definitely a worthy goal.
Well, we did receive a 2-page outline of what one person who holds that role does on a monthly basis. That was very thorough.
Yeah, I'm looking for statistics system-wide for the number of kids. We have clearinghouse data for kids who get, into college and persist, but I really don't have a picture of our graduating class the day they walk across the stage. What are their plans? Are they entering into careers, professions? Do they have certificates to go do that? And so I'm not sure if this role is the one that, which parts of it this role is impacting, but I would just like some data around it as well, so I would make an informed decision.
Dr.
I made a note,
Blassingame,
and we'll get you more information on where that.
some of what you just mentioned is the counselor's role. And then there's the college and career specialist. And some of it is, like, we also have dual credit counselors that support those needs. And so some of the responsibilities overlap, and then some don't. And so we have for example, the Care Academy, which is our college prep courses that they're responsible for, helping since the mentor that's there for our College Academy is only part-time, they support that as well. So there are some responsibilities that are shared and some that are not shared.
I had a question. I just wanted to know, one of the things I'd shared early on was that Lubbock ISD, I think, was able to save $7 or $8 million with their school scheduling. Has that been looked at all?
Yeah, to try to be more efficient, yeah. That's probably also why at some point, the extra planning period for English teachers was put on there because then that we would be able to offer more, we would need less English teachers. Sorry to say that, but that's the reality of planning periods. It cost us somewhere around is it $8,000 to $9,000 per additional planning period for the additional cost?
Well, it's 4 additional teachers for high school and 2 additional
Right.
for middle school to accommodate those additional planning periods for ELAR.
Yeah, and so,
campus.
yeah, there would be some savings or some efficiency in the schedule. The most efficient schedule is teaching 7 of 8. That's the most efficient, so.
We have a 7?
7-period day at high school. And
But teaching 6 of 7 is pretty efficient too.
So Matt, if you maybe can come back to us with your recommendations on your transportation plan with the changes that Julia made, if you can try to be around 5 million, be great. Secondly is on the option number 3 on here, is that already included in there? Reduce district budget by 7.5%? Is that,
Yeah, actually, we're already doing that.
okay, I thought you were, I was making sure.
Yeah.
Just trying to look for some big numbers that would be easy to accomplish. Any other comments by the board?
I guess I want to clarify, Dr. Killian, you asked the board to give you feedback on cost savings that were generated, ideas that were generated by the Budget Reduction Advisory Committee, and as well as what you also shared with us. Is that correct?
Yeah, just if there's any heartburn there that,
Okay.
and it's outside of, yeah.
Okay, then I will share that I have heartburn over eliminating or reducing positions that address safety on our campuses. That would be specifically APs and counselors. And then because of the absolute critical need to develop literacy in our students, I would not support eliminating librarians at any level.
Thank you.
Based on your list of items that we have not included?
Any of the non-staff ones, that's what I was also wanting, if there's anything non-staff that you had concerns about. And just knowing that staff, all the staff positions are going to hurt one way or the other.
So Dr. Killian, you're referring to the section under miscellaneous that are non-staff?
Did we
As well as
include any
transportation.
detail about the non-staff positions?
You did on the, under miscellaneous, and then also under energy.
The non-staff budget reductions would include the 7.5%. It would include like all of the MERV filter, the HVAC set point, some of those energy consumption savings. It would be the elimination of student accident insurance. It would be the cost savings that there was a cost savings in the property insurance estimate or premium that we received, correct? And that was a late addition that we were able to add. That's why it kind of ended up bumping to 69 million. So those are the items that are included, examples of the items included in the non-personnel.
And that all added up to 13.2 million. Correct, Teresa? And that all added up to 13.2 million?
Correct. That is correct.
Thank you.
Actually, if you look, the non-staff miscellaneous budget reductions is 15.388. If you go to the 68 million budget reduction plan, what slide number is that? Can we go to that on the screen?
No.
Keep going. No, you were going the right way.
I was going the right way. I'm horrible with the screen.
Dr. Killen, any other areas that we should be looking at, recommendations at this point?
No, those are the main ones I needed to have feedback on, so I can bring something forward to you, so that you can take a look at it for budget. And we will, the cabinet and I will visit later this week to go through this and try to decide on what we're going to bring forward in terms of staffing, based on the input we've had, and then also flexibility for our principals as well, because we saw that, or at least we heard that here. And then we'll work on something with transportation that might be more acceptable, with more hazardous pieces or whatever. And then obviously Bird is off the table from what I can see.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure if there, yeah, I mean, was there consensus? I'm not sure. That's something I guess you.
I mean, I can say I'm not in favor of delaying it, so.
I'm not in favor of delaying either,
I'm actually not either.
just because of overcrowding. I think it's going to cause more issues.
Yeah,
other places.
the overcrowding that we're gonna see at Wells, Postma, et cetera, we're going backwards.
I think it'll also offset the cost.
Yep.
In my book.
We got a lot to figure out.
So Matt, if you can come back with the transportation numbers, maybe give us a couple of options based on your feedback, and maybe give us more hard numbers, so we can look at the thing I asked earlier, which is the number of kids currently on buses, the number of kids aren't on buses.
Yes, sir.
If you don't mind, just a
No.
little more detail, I think around that will help us make a more informed decision. Dr. Kelly, if you can come back maybe with some more ideas of other place you can find money, and help us out to look at non-personnel cost.
Yep, and then Matt, if you could you break that down by, not just by high school, middle school, elementary as well? Yes, sir. Okay.
Got it.
Any other questions from board members, suggestions to him or staff? With that being said, I'd like to thank everyone for being here tonight. I appreciate your time, and thank those for watching from home. May I get a motion to adjourn at this time?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, raise your right hand. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.